Chapter 108, 108 Report. 108 Report. Several days later, an investigation report on Korda village was submitted to Intis Intelligence and Homeland Security Committee's Bureau 8, the machinery hive mind of the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery, and the Eternal Blazing Sun Church's Inquisition. Upon receipt, the brass immediately reviewed the report. Background: over the past year, numerous disappearances have occurred in the Fanapotter Kingdom's Grabaka province, near the Darij region, and in the Lemberg Republic's Upper Hell state. Several Beyonders without official permission have mysteriously vanished, and these incidents seem to be connected to shepherds traveling across the three regions. Among them, those from Korda village became our primary focus. Consequently, after receiving an unusual distress letter, we prioritized the mobilization of elite personnel and dispatched them as a joint investigation team. The investigators' complete written statements are as follows. The anomaly in Korda village can be categorized into two levels: reality and dreamscape. Reality. Korda was ultimately destroyed by a large-scale but unsuccessful evil god sacrificial ritual. Only a small number of villagers survived. Most villagers were utilized as nutrients for the failed creation of an evil god. The remaining individuals were reassembled in peculiar ways and transformed into various monsters. The evil god's sacrificial ritual altered the landscape. The river dried up and changed course. The village square and cathedral were elevated nearly 40 meters by a small-scale orogeny, forming a blood-colored pillar. The failed evil god creation was located atop the pillar. However, when we discovered it, it had already been destroyed, potentially by self-destruction or interference from other factions. Korda's houses also underwent reassembly. Some formed a twisted, thorny city wall around the blood-colored pillar, while others were arranged in circular patterns in these severely damaged buildings. We found only a few coins and the most common lever blue. We did not find any written information or anything that could clearly identify Korda. The reason remains unknown. Only the House of Lumien Li, the target, contained books, newspapers, magazines, and other items that clearly identified it. Within the ruins of Korda, there are two abnormal areas surrounding the blood-colored pillar. One can induce a deep slumber, leading to a dreamscape, while the other is teeming with life, filled with flowers and trees, and features a self-rocking crib. Our assumption regarding the latter area is that it is closely related to Madame Puali's of Korda. For a detailed explanation, refer to the dreamscape section. At the other edge of the blood-colored pillar, we unearthed 4 relatively well-preserved corpses. The location likely corresponds to the original cathedral cemetery. The first corpse was a woman, no more than 20 years old, who had been strangled to death. The second corpse was a young man, also no more than 20 years old, who had drowned. The third corpse was surrounded by coffin fragments. Female, over 60 years old, and died of mechanical asphyxiation. Based on other evidence, we speculate that she was suffocated with a pillow. The fourth corpse was male and had not decomposed. His tongue had been severed while he was alive, and there were visible ligature marks on his neck. Relevant speculations about the aforementioned corpses can be found in the dreamscape section. Upon entering the ruins of Korda, we were likely affected by the power emanating from Lumien Li's body. Our memories of the date became disordered, and the thought of leaving ceased to occur to us. One by one, we fell asleep. While in the dream state, our bodies maintained a weak level of activity, eliminating the need for food replenishment for several days. Had we remained in this state for another half a month, it is uncertain whether we would have awoken from hunger or perished within the dream. The entire ruin is locked in a loop capable of reverting to its original state at any moment. The trigger point is most likely tied to Lumien Li's self-awareness and the restrictions he imposes. The former refers to the inevitable restart if Lumien Li's subconscious anticipates it, while the latter stems from his desire to prevent anyone from disrupting Korda's current state and the development of the dream. Any relevant event would immediately trigger a restart. We inquired with villagers from surrounding areas, but they reported no abnormalities concerning Korda. Through their responses and previously gathered information, we confirmed 3 points. First, there was never a legend of a deceased warlock in Korda. This refers to a story told by Lumien Li in the dreamscape. Once, a warlock lived in Korda. After his death, an owl perched on his bedhead for a time before flying away. The warlock's corpse grew heavy, requiring 9 bulls to transport it. Second, no elves suspected of being in the form of lizards have appeared in the Darij area. Third, Lent is traditional folklore and had no issues originally. Dreamscape. The dreamscape originated from Lumiere Li and is so realistic that we couldn't discern that we were dreaming. We consulted psychologists and dream experts and synthesized their opinions to form a hypothesis about this dream. It is an amalgamation of Lumiere Li's personal experiences, all the novels he has read, and his assumptions and conjectures based on previous events. The dream exhibits obvious coincidences and characteristics of wish fulfillment at certain critical junctures. Within this dreamscape, not all the situations we encountered were real, nor were they entirely fabricated. Disorganized facts, the minutiae of daily interactions, and the illusory scenes that left a profound impact on Lumiere Li were reassembled in a chaotic and symbolic manner, presenting themselves to us. This is both a characteristic of the dreamscape and a manifestation of Lumiere Li's subconscious avoidance or fear of certain issues. Moving forward, we will provide a detailed account of every aspect of our experience. We ought to have realized that we were in a dream earlier on. The most evident clue was that we did not recall needing to change our clothes until Lumiere Li reminded us that our garments were severely damaged. Though this is quite unusual, humans tend not to think critically within dreams. It has been confirmed that we did not send telegrams. The corresponding responses may have originated from Lumiere Li's subconscious and the knowledge he possesses. By combining the events in the dream with the situation in reality, we have arrived at the following conjectures. Our consciousness and knowledge, to some extent, enrich the dream, and we may have inadvertently exposed some of our secrets to Lumiere Li. There are at least two distinct evil god faiths in Cordu. One represents a power akin to Earth Mother's, embodied by Administrator Beast's wife, Madame Pualis. The other is the one followed by Guillaume Benet, the former padre, and the majority of the villagers. The latter faith ultimately led to Cordu's destruction. During the Lent celebration, the spring elf's beheading and send-off symbolized driving the force representing Madame Pualis out of Cordu. There may have been a violent conflict between the two factions. Simultaneously, the decapitation of Ava Lizier, the personification of the spring elf, symbolized that this girl had discovered something amiss in reality. When she attempted to escape or inform others, she was clandestinely strangled to death by Guillaume Benet's group. Raymond Gregg was thrown into the river. The appearance of his spirit body beneath the cathedral symbolizes that, like Ava, he was deemed a snitch and subsequently drowned. Jean Maury discovered that his wife, Sybil, had an affair with the former padre. In a fit of rage, he became mute. This symbolized that as a devout follower of the eternal blazing sun, his tongue was cut off when he tried to inform others about the village's abnormalities. His subsequent disappearance implied that he had been murdered. Naroka's death shares the same potent symbolism as Ava, Raymond, and Jean. First, she must have covertly followed Madame Pualis, intending to allow her deceased husband's spirit to return home through the aid of the soul messenger. Thus, her post-death behavior was to enter Paramitha. Second, it is highly likely that she was killed by her youngest son, Arnaud André, likely because she had discovered the issue with Guillaume Benet's group and wanted to inform Madame Pualis. Based on our search of the ruins, the Lent celebration, and Madame Pualis's claim that she could depart at a specific moment, it is implied that she, her husband Beast, butler Louis Lund, and lady's maid Kathy left Corda before the ritual on the 12th night. They remain alive, and their whereabouts are unknown. This is reflected in the dream by the lady's refusal to assist at critical moments. However, considering the circumstances in the peculiar area teeming with vitality, we suspect that Madame Pualis left something behind before her departure and indirectly participated in the ritual on the 12th night. The black-robed man in the warlock's tomb likely symbolizes Lumiere Li's mutated persona due to his corruption. However, for some reason, Lumiere Li did not appear to be deeply corrupted, enabling him to easily triumph during the skirmish. Given his increased courage, the bizarre lizard-like creature found in the mouths of Aurora Lee, Michel Garriga, and others might symbolize their corruption and mutation, eventually transforming them into an alternate version of themselves. Questions. 1. How is Lumiere Li aware of the abilities of Guillaume Benet, Pierre Barry, and others? If he had secretly observed them in reality, it would be understandable if he remained undetected once or twice. There must be an inherent reason why he could obtain so much information without facing consequences. 2. Why did the villagers and Aurora Lee behave indistinguishably from real people, making it challenging for us to recognize that we were in a dream until Lumiere Li believed that something abnormal should have occurred to them? 3. What does Paramitha symbolize? 4. What do Madame Pualisa's numerous children in the castle and the crib with an invisible object represent? 5. Why did Lumian Li use lizard-like elves to portray the villagers' corruption? 6. What do Lumian Li and Aurora Li's attempts to escape Cordu and enter Permitha signify? 7. Why did the ritual on the 12th night fail? 8. How can Lumian Li enable us to enter his dream? He evidently lacks the ability to do so. 9. Why did he suddenly acquire normal Beyonder powers? 10. How did he survive and cause the ruins of Cordu to enter a loop? 11. Aurora Li's abnormalities occurred at entirely different times during the 2 cycles. What does this indicate? 12. What does the legend of the deceased warlock symbolize? 13. What does the warlock's corpse in the coffin in the underground tomb represent? 14. What does the owl symbolize? 15. What does the change in the horoscope signify? 16. What is the origin of the matter? Conclusions and recommendations. This is a quintessential disaster resulting from the worship of an evil god. Currently, 6 known survivors exist. Lumian Li, former Padre Guillaume Benet, Pualis de Roquefort, Beast, Louis Lund, and Cathy. The latter 5 are adherents of evil gods. We must locate and eliminate them as soon as possible. Directly killing Lumian Li is not advised. Until his issues are understood and resolved, his death might trigger an even more severe anomaly. The optimal solution is to capture and securely contain him. Reporters, Ryan Visha of Machinery Hive Mind, Major Leah Bellet of Bureau 8, and Purifier Valentine de la Court of the Inquisition. Chapter 109, 109-Minute Hope. 109-Minute Hope. Days earlier, beneath the Crimson Peak, adjacent to the warped city wall, Lumian knelt on the ground, gazing up at the enigmatic woman as she approached. Her words echoed in his ears, only to gradually grow muffled. Lumian's hands pressed against the ground, clenching the soil as if attempting to crush it into liquid. As the mysterious woman halted about a meter away, he scrambled to his feet, anxiety gripping his voice. "Didn't you say there's still hope? Didn't you claim Aurora and the others could be saved if I broke out of the loop myself?" His voice grew hoarser with each word. The enigmatic woman remained silent, her eyes filled with pity as she gazed at him. Lumian hesitated before asking, hope lacing his words, "There's still hope, right? That's not just a fleeting dream." During my discussion with Aurora, she spoke of things I had never heard of, like how the description of an honorific name can hint at 2 separate entities. His eyes locked onto the woman, fear and hope battling as he scrutinized her every move. At last, she nodded. "There is indeed hope." Lumian's eyes brightened, waiting for her to elaborate. In a gentle voice, the woman explained, "In truth, Aurora has already died, but mystically, she's not entirely gone. Do you recall the soft, faint sounds you hear from within your body each time you perform the summoning dance? Do you remember the light fragments from Aurora and the others that flew into your chest on the 12th night ritual? Are those their spirit bodies, their voices?" Lumian interrupted, eagerness filling his voice. The woman responded, a mix of calm and pity, "They can only be considered soul fragments. At the end of the 12th night, you became a conduit for the hidden entity to unleash its horrifying power. The surrounding believers, including the soul fragments of the sacrifice, were absorbed by you. Guillaume Benet, who led the ritual, was the sole exception. Later, those soul fragments and the potent corruptive power were sealed in the left side of your chest by my lord. That's why, as you became increasingly awake in your dreams and sensed the date and loop more clearly, Aurora and the other villagers seemed more and more lifelike. They even displayed a degree of self-awareness and cognition. To truly awaken from the dream and restrain the looping power consuming the ruins, you had to rely on yourself. You had to find the courage to confront the pain, face the truth, and chase after the elusive hope. If I were to resolve it, there's only one option, to completely annihilate you in the ruins of Cordu. Otherwise, the corruption within you will seep out uncontrollably, and Aurora and the others will truly perish in the realm of mysticism." As the mysterious woman mentioned the 12th night ritual, Lumian couldn't help but remember. A sharp pain stabbed his head, and only a few images surfaced. Aurora, with vacant eyes, shoved him away from the altar. Beams of light burst from Aurora and the villagers, spiraling into the vortex on his chest. Guillaume Benet, the padre, revealed a shocked expression as he fled the altar. Beyond that, Lumian couldn't recall anything else. Only the events within the dream were clear, as if some force prevented him from remembering the rest. His face contorted, his body trembling. I can't remember much. The woman nodded. That's normal. Firstly, it's a subconscious self-protection to prevent an overload of painful memories and intense scenes from causing you to collapse and lose control. Secondly, there are things you haven't witnessed and don't know the truth about. I don't know either. Yes, I'll need you to do something in Trier eventually. There are two exceptional psychologists I know there. I can arrange an appointment for you and see who's available to treat you. They can help you remember more and reconstruct the events in Cordu as much as possible. Lumien's emotions roiled as he listened, but all he could muster was a soft, "Thank you." Fists clenched, he asked anxiously, "Then what can I do to bring Aurora and the others back?" The woman sighed, admitting, "I don't know either." Seeing Lumien's eyes darken, she added, "But you have to believe that true miracles exist in this world. And the great existence I mentioned earlier is synonymous with miracle." Despair and hope swelled in Lumien's heart. Though he knew the mysterious woman before him was likely offering comfort and hope, he couldn't help but say, "You said that once I unlocked the secret of the dream, you'd tell me the honorific name of that great existence." Her expression grew solemn, her tone serious. "I'll tell you now. Remember it well. His honorific name is, the fool that doesn't belong to this era, the mysterious ruler above the gray fog, the king of yellow and black who wields good luck." As she spoke, Lumien felt his consciousness slipping, as if he could see a thin gray fog and a looming castle above it. A gaze weighed upon him. Simultaneously, the entire village of Cordu shuddered as the thin fog engulfing the area receded rapidly. By the time Lumien regained clarity, sunlight had already filtered through the sky, casting golden specks upon the crimson mountain peak and desolate earth. Lumien recalled the 3 lines of the honorific name and his conversation with Aurora in his dream. He winced, a bitter smile forming as he said, "I thought there'd be a description of the past, present, and future." The enigmatic woman in the orange dress tersely acknowledged his remark. "There should be another one in the future, but if I use a description other than the 3 lines to pray to him now, I can't guarantee the response will be from him. You should know that such a situation is very dangerous." Silent for a few seconds, Lumien then asked, a glint of hope in his eyes, "If I work diligently for you, can I eventually summon that great being to resurrect Aurora?" "That's one way," the woman said softly. "You can also explore other methods. I won't stop you. I'm merely reminding you that many resurrection techniques have grave flaws." Lumien nodded, signaling his understanding. He didn't dare to inquire, yet couldn't help but ask, "Is there a significant chance of resurrection?" The enigmatic woman glanced at him and sighed. "It's very, very slim, but I know you'll still pursue it." Lumien pressed his lips together, remaining silent. It wasn't that he didn't want to assure her he'd do everything in his power to find a way to bring Aurora back, but he feared that speaking would reveal the sorrow surging within his heart. After a few seconds, he asked in a raspy voice, "What do you need me to do in Trier?" "Join a covert organization and help me gather some intel," the woman replied simply. "I'll tell you how to contact them once you're in Trier." She added, "Besides uncovering the truth from your memories, you can also look into the survivors of this catastrophe." "Survivors?" Lumien's eyes narrowed. The woman nodded. "Besides you, there are 5 others, Madame Pualis, Beast, Louis Lund, Cathy, who left Cordu before the 12th night, and Guillaume Benet, who was protected by the ritual as its host. They escaped before this place was completely destroyed. The Padre is still alive." Lumien's lips curled up. The enigmatic lady locked eyes with him and said, "If my divination is accurate, they should be hiding somewhere in Trier." "Very good." Lumien smiled, wiping the corners of his eyes. The woman then looked at Ryan, Leah, and Valentine, who slept near the room's edge on the thorny city wall, and asked Lumien, "What do you plan to do with them? If they leave alive, you'll undoubtedly be hunted by Bureau 8, Machinery Hive Mind, and the Inquisition. From now on, you can only hide. You'll never live openly under the sun. You'll be forever accompanied by darkness, filth, and danger." Lumien glanced at Ryan and the others, chuckling hoarsely. "Will killing them bring Aurora back?" The woman shook her head. "No." Lumien scoffed, bowing his head with his eyes closed. Soon, he looked up and asked, "What's the name of the organization I'm about to join? How should I contact you once I'm in Trier?" The woman sighed faintly. "I'll tell you when the time comes. I'll give you my messenger's summoning method and the corresponding medium later. Contact me through that." Lumiere fell quiet for a moment before posing another question. "Did I possess the power to trap Cordu in a loop?" "Strictly speaking, you didn't. At least not before receiving the Circle Inhabitant boon," the woman explained casually. "This place is corrupted by that hidden being everywhere, and the power level sealed in your left chest is quite high. Therefore, when your emotions fluctuate and you're in a subconscious state, you can mobilize the corresponding specialness to reset this place." She paused, adding, "However, you've always been physically in a loop. The corruption sealed within your body allows you to reset your form at 6 a.m. every day and return to 6 a.m. on the 12th night. Only changes brought about by beyonder characteristics and boons are retained. Is this the real reason why I recover every time I wake up from injuries in the ruins? No wonder I didn't starve to death." Lumiere immediately understood. He glanced at his body, a self-deprecating smile forming. It'll always be that day. That nightmarish day. Without waiting for the woman's response, he looked up and asked, "How should I address you?" She smiled, beginning to reply, "You can call me." Before she could finish, cards suddenly danced in the air. Each card bore a unique pattern, fluttering towards Lumiere. Instinctively, Lumiere extended his right hand, attempting to catch some of the cards. At that moment, most of the cards vanished, leaving just one. The card gently settled in Lumiere's palm, face up. It depicted a figure extending their scepter into the sky and pointing at the ground with their left hand. Tarot card, Magician. Lumiere glanced up in shock, realizing the enigmatic woman had disappeared. Should I call her Madam Magician? Lumiere subconsciously flipped the tarot card in his hand, revealing rows of minute into script. The spirit that wanders about the unfounded, an upper world creature that is friendly to humans, a messenger that belongs solely to Magician. Lumiere studied the words for a moment before tucking the tarot card away. He glanced at Ryan and the others, then turned around and staggered away from the area. As he walked, Lumiere couldn't help but look back at the blood-stained mountain peak and the twisted, thorny city wall. The Cordu in his memory had already morphed into this. It bore no resemblance to what it once was, but Lumiere still tried his best to observe and search, hoping to overlap the scene in his mind with reality. He wanted to take another look at the giant atop the mountain, but he knew that it would cause him grave harm. Unwittingly, Lumiere slowly circled the blood-stained mountain peak and thorny city wall, his gaze constantly scanning the distorted and chaotic objects. He knew what he was looking for, and he knew he would never find it. Just like that, Lumiere arrived at the spot where the wooden wall had blocked him. Most of the area had collapsed, revealing the garden behind it. The garden was lush and vibrant, a stark contrast to the blood-stained peak, the warped city wall, and the ruins on the other side. In the center was a brown wooden crib, reminiscent of the one Lumiere had seen in Madame Puali's castle. He subconsciously leaned over and realized that there was a small human-shaped indentation on the slightly aged white cotton swaddling cloth in the crib. It was as if a baby had once lain here, but its whereabouts were now unknown. What does this mean? Just as this thought crossed Lumiere's mind, he felt the sunlight shining down from the sky grow much brighter. He instinctively looked up and saw golden flames completely engulfing the mountaintop. The three-headed, six-armed giant loomed in the inferno, seemingly melting. Lumiere stared blankly for a few seconds before suddenly raising his hands to shield his face. The sunlight was too intense. In the semi-subterranean two-story building at the edge of the ruins, Lumiere trudged to his sister's bedroom with the 237 Vril d'Or and 46 Kopit he had collected. He grabbed a brown suitcase filled with clothes and memorabilia and pushed open the door. He was here to say goodbye. As soon as he stepped in and saw the desk with the manuscripts, his head throbbed as an image surfaced. Aurora's eyes darted around, no longer vacant. She looked at Lumiere, who had been pushed away, and said with difficulty, "My notebook. Grande Sir's witchcraft notebook. Is there important information in it?" Lumiere pressed his forehead, walked to the desk, and opened the drawer below. Familiar dark notebooks greeted his eyes. He suddenly remembered that Aurora had taught him a great deal of mysticism knowledge before Cordu was destroyed. In Dirige, At the steam locomotive station. The ticket agent eyed Lumien and asked, "Where are your identification documents?" "I forgot," replied Lumien, clad in a linen shirt, a dark jacket, and a round-rimmed black hat, as he held a brown suitcase. He then turned and walked away from the window. A short man in a half-top hat and black suit approached Lumien, whispering, "Do you want to take the courier carriage? It's headed for Bigorre. Does it require identification?" Lumien inquired. The short man chuckled, responding, "No need. Our business is about to be crushed by the steam locomotive. Why would we need identification documents? So, are you taking it or not?" This is the last remnant of romance from the classical era. Lumien gave a slight nod and asked, "How much?" The short man's enthusiasm flared. 20 vol d'or to Bigorre, takes about a day. There are 5 stops in between. Each stop allows for a rest, changing carriage drivers and horses. 2 of the stops also provide free food. Without further questions, Lumien followed the shortman to a deserted street nearby. A large carriage drawn by 4 horses was parked at the roadside. Upon boarding, Lumien discovered the interior was rather spacious. Like the public carriage, it had 2 rows separated by an aisle, as well as space for larger luggage. He found a seat by the window, placed his suitcase down, and pulled out a book with a dark red cover. As the horses neighed outside, Lumien flipped through the book, illuminated by sunlight streaming through the window. Beside him sat a man in his 30s with a well-groomed mustache, brown hair, blue eyes, and smart attire. He glanced at the book in Lumien's hand, asking with interest, "Eternal Love? Aurora Leigh's book? The one featuring the female lead named Kingsley and the male lead named Seal?" "Yes." Lumien nodded. The mustached man became chatty. "This book is Aurora Leigh's earliest work. The writing was quite amateurish, particularly the dialogue between characters. It doesn't sound like something people would say in real life at all. It's so emotional, it's uncomfortable." "Indeed." Lumien nodded again. He bowed his head and flipped to the last few pages of the book, his gaze resting on the relevant passage. On her deathbed, Kingsley clutched Seal's outstretched hand and gazed at his anguished expression. She forced a smile and said with difficulty, "Stupid, live well." End of Part 1, Nightmare. Chapter 110, 110 Foreigner. 110 Foreigner. "For you are dust, and to dust you shall return," from the Bible, Genesis 3 verse 19. The imposing grayish-white city wall, rising to a height of 3 meters, loomed before Lumien, stretching as far as the eye could see. A multitude of private carriages, 4-seaters, open-tops, tandems, and cargo carriers queued, awaiting entry through the city gate. Blue-uniformed tax collectors and white-shirted, black-vested police officers inspected each carriage methodically. Occasionally, they would demand identification or order pedestrians to open their suitcases. Lumien, clutching his brown suitcase, scanned the scene, casting furtive glances as he sought a way to bypass the checkpoint. Before long, a man who had observed his behavior approached. "What's the matter, friend? You look a bit uneasy." The man was somewhat shorter than Lumien but twice as broad. His cheeks were plump, causing his blue eyes to appear minuscule. As he neared, Lumien caught a whiff of sweat mingled with cheap cologne, prompting him to wrinkle his nose in distaste. Lumien gestured toward the gates, puzzled, and inquired, "What's all this for? Are they searching for criminals? Why screen those entering Trier and not the ones leaving?" The disheveled, blonde-haired man in a billowy blue shirt appraised Lumien. "My friend, are you from some small city or village?" Upon seeing Lumien nod, the man sighed and explained, "They're collecting taxes." "Tariffs? Tariffs for entering Trier?" Lumien asked. The man nodded. "Exactly. This city wall encircles Trier. There are 54 gates, each manned by tax collectors and police. They also apprehend wanted criminals." "Are all goods taxed?" Lumien inquired, curiosity piqued. The man touched his blue canvas shirt and replied, "Almost everything, only grains and flour are exempt. Once upon a time they were, but after the war a few years back, the price of bread in Trier skyrocketed, inciting riots and protests. Eventually, the government abolished tariffs on all food. Ah, if only drinkers were as bold. Liquor, wine, and champagne are taxed the most. Many people venture to the suburbs on weekends to drink tax-free alcohol at small taverns. They call it town hopping. Interesting, Lumien nodded thoughtfully. The man glanced around and lowered his voice. If you want to avoid the tariffs, I can help you into the city. All you have to do is pay me a small fee. You mean bribe them? Lumien gestured with his chin at the tax collector and police near the city gate. The men snorted. Their greed is greater than an elephant's appetite. I'll show you a path into the city without checkpoints. But isn't Trier completely surrounded by walls? Lumien didn't conceal his bafflement. The men grinned. You'll see soon enough. Then he teased, Noble sir, do you require my assistance? Lumien considered for a moment before asking, how much will it cost? 3 vol d'or, the men replied with a congenial smile. If you agree, we can depart immediately. You can pay once we're inside the city. Deal. Lumien adjusted his dark wide-brimmed hat, picked up his brown suitcase, and followed the rotund man away from the city gate. 15 minutes later, they arrived at a hill blanketed in vegetation and soil, with grayish-white stones peeking through. Scaffolding, decaying pillow wood, and numerous pits were scattered about. It appeared to be an abandoned mine. The rotund man guided Lumien through heaps of jumbled rocks to the entrance of a mine. Is this the shortcut? Lumien asked cautiously. The portly man in the blue shirt chuckled. You really don't know much about Trier. Ever heard the saying that underground Trier is even larger than the Trier above ground? No, Lumien shook his head. The man elucidated, Trier used to be much smaller. It was surrounded by quarries that supplied stone for building the city. As the population swelled, the city had to expand outward, enveloping these quarries. As a result, the ground became riddled with holes and mine tunnels. Add to that the portion of Trier that sank underground in the Fourth Epoch, plus the sewers, subways, and gas pipes installed by the government, aren't these more extensive than what's on the surface? Lumien's eyes widened in understanding. Are you taking me into the city through underground Trier? Yes. The man turned, stooped, and entered the mine. He casually inquired, what should I call you? Seal. Lumien brushed back the golden hair at his temples. And you? Just call me Rameyes. The burly man rummaged through a pile of stones in the mine's corner and unearthed an iron-black lantern. Clearly made of metal, the rusted lantern was cylindrical, with the upper section slightly narrower than the lower. A black rubber lining encircled its base. At the junction of the narrow and wide cylinders, a polished trumpet-shaped metal piece was embedded, though a few rust spots remained. Rameyes produced a matchbox, fiddled with it briefly, and an orange flame tinged with blue erupted from the metal trumpet, illuminating the mine's depths. What's this? Lumien asked, puzzled. Holding the iron-black lamp, Rameyes ventured underground, chattering. Carbide lamp. Invented by the Cave Association. Many miners use it. I don't know why it glows, but I just need to put some rocks and water in, attach them top and bottom, and when needed, press here and ignite the mouth with flames. Carbide and water react to form acetylene, which burns and emits light. Lumien recalled the chemistry he'd studied a few months prior. He remained silent for a time as he followed Rameyes underground along a disused mine tunnel. Then he inquired, the Cave Association. Trier Cave Association. Formed by a group of spelunking enthusiasts. Nowadays, they seem to be involved with the mines. Rameyes turned to Lumien, walking beside him, and asked with a grin, why didn't you just take the steam locomotive into Trier? The train station checkpoints aren't that strict. They just do spot checks. Lumien reminisced and replied, I wanted to experience the last vestiges of romance from the classical era. A courier carriage? Rameyes chortled. That's far pricier than a steam locomotive. Your accent gives you away as from the Rhine or Riston region. The journey from the south to Trier runs about 120 vol d'or, doesn't it? And it takes 4.5 days. On a steam locomotive, you'd pay less than 50 vol d'or for a third-class seat and arrive in under 20 hours. So, the last bit of romance from the classical era, you say? Sounds more like a con job for folks like you. You must have shelled out a pretty penny, huh? Lumien responded candidly, a fair amount. I've only got 267 vol d'or left. Rameyes glanced at him once more and averted his eyes. What a waste! Clutching the carbide lamp, he traversed an archway and veered into another passage bathed in the orange-yellow glow cast by the lamp's flame. Lumion glanced up and noticed rocks nestled in the darkness overhead, adorned with moss that wept droplets of water. The path underfoot was pockmarked with holes, and stone pillars flanked both sides, supporting the cave's ceiling. Stones and various objects were heaped between the pillars, creating a street wide enough for 6 or 7 people to walk abreast. Under the carbide lamp's illumination, a steel nameplate affixed to a stone pillar came into view. Inscribed on it in Intis, Rua Droit. "There's a street name down here?" Lumion queried, puzzled. Gripping the carbide lamp, Ramais chuckled and replied, "Didn't I tell you? This is underground Trier. In fact, it was constructed decades ago during city renovations. The brass deemed the underground too chaotic, a veritable labyrinth. Rioters, murderers, smugglers, and cultists all found refuge here, and something had to be done. Additionally, numerous houses had crumbled and sunk due to the underground quarries. Reinforcement was necessary. So, City Hall spent nearly a decade repairing pillars, constructing foundations, and connecting the previously isolated quarries, subterranean ruins, catacombs, and sewers. To prevent workers from getting lost, the underground streets were named to correspond with those above during the renovations. Roads, squares, and alleys were recreated down here, and nameplates were hung, marking the streets. If future repairs were needed, the names could just be referenced. In other words, Lumion gestured overhead with his free hand. "The real Rua Droit is just above us." "Yes." Ramais pressed on. "This is underground Trier. There's an anti-smuggling wall up ahead. Quarry police often patrol the area, but don't fret. I'll guide you through a small tunnel." The brass, with their phony collars and lies, believe they can manage underground Trier like they do above ground, but they're only aware of half the entrances and modified routes. As he spoke, he led Lumion to a dead end and located a narrow crevice to crawl through. Lumion trailed closely. 2 or 3 minutes later, they emerged from the small tunnel. Before them stood a wall composed of stone pillars and a street wedged between. Just then, a burly figure appeared beside the stone pillar, holding a carbide lamp, and addressed Ramais, "Is this our customer?" Ramais spun around and grinned at Lumion. "Foreigner, I've changed my mind. The price is 265 vril d'or. Wasn't I generous to leave you enough for bread and a hotel tonight? What if I refuse?" Lumion's face displayed a mix of fear and defiance. Ramais's chubby face quivered with laughter. "What do you think will happen? Didn't your mother warn you not to trust strangers too easily when you're away from home?" He and the burly man closed in on Lumion from opposite directions. Lumion smiled, set down the suitcase, and advanced towards Ramais and his accomplice. In the flickering firelight, over 10 seconds swiftly ticked by, and the carbide lamp ended up in Lumion's possession. Lumion crouched beside the trembling Ramais, his face battered and swollen, and pulled all the banknotes from his wallet. In the dim orange and blue light, he counted them with grave intent. Gently patting Ramais's right cheek with the wad of cash, Lumion grinned. "Now there's only 319 vril d'or left." With that, he pocketed the banknotes and strolled toward a path that appeared to lead up to the surface. A nameplate dangled from a stone pillar, inscribed with 2 lines of Intician script, "Rue du Pot de Chambre, Le Marquis du Quartier du Gentleman." Someone had scratched out "Rue du Pot de Chambre" with a stone and scrawled a new name beside it, "Rue Anarchy." Chapter 111, 111 Messenger. 111 Messenger. Clutching the carbide lamp, Lumion climbed the stone steps. Soon, light appeared ahead, accompanied by a cacophony of noise. Emerging from the silent underground, it felt as if the entire world had sprung to life. Lumion quickened his pace, twisting the valve on the carbide lamp with his right hand, stopping the water droplets from dripping into the carbide pile below. As the acetylene gas burned out, the flames in the metal mouth gradually faded. Just then, he caught a glimpse of the scene outside. Tall and low buildings appeared to have solidified at the moment of collapse, either tilted or on the verge of tumbling down, but standing stubbornly. Pedestrians wore old or tattered clothing, and arguments and curses filled the air, the noise never subsiding. At the underground exit, Lumion spotted a 5-story building called the Auberge du Coq d'Or. The top 2 floors of the brownish building seemed like later additions, contrasting with the Roselle-era pillar walls, arches, large windows, and patterns on the lower floors. It looked so simplistic it could have been transplanted from Cordoue. Lugging his suitcase and carbide lamp, Lumière navigated through children scavenging for orange peels and quarreling adults until he reached the entrance of the Auberge du Coq d'Or. He glanced at the hotel floor, littered with yellow phlegm, shredded paper, spilled ketchup, and alcohol stains. Occasionally, a horde of bedbugs would congregate on the ceiling and walls. Had his hands been free, Lumière would have applauded the scene. Cordoue's OL tavern was much cleaner than this. He found a route devoid of filth and headed to the front desk at a moderate pace. A plump, middle-aged woman sat there, her grayish-white dress stained with oil and her brown hair tied in a simple bun. She looked up at Lumière with her blue eyes, unfazed by the disdain and resistance on his face. This is the best and cheapest in En Rue Anarchy, in the market area. But the owner's a miser who can't bear to hire cleaning ladies. He only gets freelancers to clean it once a week. Does he skimp on your salary too? Lumière asked, feigning naivete. This set the woman off. Do you want a room or not? Yes. Lumière quickly clarified his intent, looking frightened. I'd like to know the price. The woman calmed down. It depends on the room. The top 2 floors are 3 vol d'or a week, and the bottom 2 are 5 vol d'or. If that's too much, you can knock on doors and ask who's willing to share their bed or rent out floor space for 1 to 1.5 vol d'or a week. Give me a room on the lower 2 floors. Lumière reasoned it'd be easier to escape, whether by jumping from a window or taking the stairs. The plump woman sized him up. Pay 15 vol d'or up front for the whole month, and it's yours. Why the discount? Lumière feigned the ignorance of a country bumpkin new to the city. The woman sneered. Many people have no choice but to move or leave Trier after a week or 2. This place is both heaven and hell. Lumière pulled out 3 light blue 5 vol d'or notes and handed them over. The currency was all in 5 vol d'or denominations, featuring the bust of Intis Republic's first president, Levanx, along with laboring farmers and herders on the front, and the Hornassus mountain range on the back. Upon receiving the full month's rent, the plump woman's expression visibly relaxed. She produced 2 brass keys strung together and tossed them to Lumière. Room 207 on the 2nd floor. There's a small diner downstairs and a tavern in the basement. You'll find sulfur in the room's table drawer to help chase away those damn bugs. My name's Fells. If you need anything, just come to me. Thank you, Madame Fells. Lumière took the keys, grabbed his suitcase and carbide lamp, and headed upstairs to the 2nd floor. As he ascended, he noticed newspapers and cheap pink paper plastered on the walls, though some had already peeled away, exposing the cracks they were meant to hide and an abundance of bedbugs. The 2nd floor contained 8 rooms and 2 washrooms. Each room was cramped, with a bed to the right. A table nestled between the bed's edge and the wall sat beneath the window, a rickety chair positioned in front of it. There was no other furniture, but rows of bedbugs crawled across the ceiling. Having grown accustomed to Aurora's cleanliness, Lumière set down his suitcase and carbide lamp, opened the drawer, and took out some sulfur. He lit it with a match, and as the pungent smell filled the room, the bedbugs fled. Within seconds, Lumière detected the sulfuric scent from the room next door. Almost simultaneously, some of the bedbugs returned, seeking refuge. He quickly understood the situation. He had smoked the bedbugs into the adjacent room, and the tenant had used sulfur to chase them back. Amused, Lumière bent down, opened his suitcase, and took out pen and paper. Amidst the potent sulfur smell, he sat at the wooden table and began writing. Honorable Madam Magician. I've arrived in Trier as agreed. Please advise on my next steps, which organization to join, and how to contact them. Are the 2 psychologists available soon? When can I receive treatment? Do you have any new leads on Guillaume Benet and Madame Pualis? After penning the letter, Lumière retrieved an orange candle from his sister's room. Lighting it with his spirituality, the scent of citrus and lavender enveloped the air. Instinctively, he closed his eyes, his expression calming. After standing quietly for a minute or 2, Lumière used the ritual silver dagger to sanctify the candle and create a wall of spirituality. He then dripped essential oil on the flame. With the preparations complete, he placed the magician card on the altar, a medium for summoning a messenger to pinpoint the incantation. Lumion stepped back, observing the misty orange fire, and muttered in ancient Hermes, "I." An invisible wind swirled within the spiritual wall, dimming the room. Switching to Hermes, he continued, "I summon in my name, the spirit that wanders about the unfounded, an upper-world creature that is friendly to humans, a messenger that belongs solely to magician." As the wind howled, the candle flame turned deep blue, casting a sinister, cold atmosphere. Lumion focused on the candle, awaiting Madame Magician's messenger. After a few seconds of silence, the letter on the altar floated into the air. Surprised, Lumion glanced up to find a doll the size of a man's forearm perched atop the carved window. With long blonde hair, light blue eyes, pale white skin, and an exquisite pale gold dress, the doll bore strikingly realistic yet bizarre features. In the next second, the letter landed in the doll's smooth, shiny hand that lacked any skin-like texture. "Are you Madame Magician's messenger?" Lumion asked. The doll slowly lowered its head, Lumion's figure reflecting in its unfocused, light blue eyes. Its voice, ethereal and angry, replied, "Choose a cleaner environment next time." With that, the doll vanished along with the letter. Lumion was stunned for a moment before murmuring, "Didn't Aurora say the altar just needed to be clean and tidy?" As he glanced around, he noticed numerous bedbug corpses on the floor. The room was now insect-free. "This is better than sulfur." Lumion stroked his chin and ended the summoning ritual. Lumion habitually cleaned the room before squatting beside his suitcase to retrieve his toiletries. Aurora's dark-colored witchcraft notebooks lay undisturbed at the bottom. During his journey to Trier, Lumion had already skimmed through them without finding anything suspicious. Aurora wasn't one for recording her personal thoughts or daily minutiae. Her witchcraft notebook was purely dedicated to mystical knowledge, filled with incantations, symbols, and principles for selecting ingredients. Likely due to Aurora's penchant for keeping detailed accounts, most spells included information about when and where they were obtained, their cost, or the items exchanged for them. Lumion realized the curly-haired baboons research society likely had numerous interest groups. Aurora frequently attended academy gatherings, where many spells were traded among members. She also participated in exchanges with other groups, occasionally acquiring mystical knowledge and spells from events like April Fool's Day. Finding nothing amiss in the notebooks, Lumion resolved to continue his investigation after consulting the psychologists and locating Padre and Madame Pualis. He knew his sister wouldn't have mentioned the notebook without reason at that critical juncture. There must have been an important message she wished to convey. Gazing at the dark-covered notebooks, Lumion determined to study his sister's recorded knowledge in reverse order, starting that night. Although using spells in combat was nearly impossible for a hunter, understanding them could help him identify any issues with the corresponding mystical knowledge or detect abnormalities. With his belongings packed, Lumion's stomach growled in hunger. He stood up and glanced at the window. The dimming light of dusk allowed him to vaguely see his reflection in the glass. His hair, now dyed blonde and grown out, barely disguised his features. Dressed in a white shirt, black vest, and dark suit, his cold, indifferent expression made him appear years older. Even Guillaume Benet would find him only vaguely familiar. Lumion patted his face, coaxing a smile, before opening the door and stepping out. Chapter 112, 112 Charlie. 112 Charlie. In the dimly lit cellar of the Auberge du Coq d'Or, a cozy bar had just enough space for 20 to 30 patrons. The moment Lumion stepped in, he saw a man leap onto a small round table, beer in hand, and address the handful of customers around him. "Ladies and gentlemen, lend me your ears. I experienced something unbelievable 2 days ago." By the scant light from the steam lamps on the wall, Lumion discerned that the man was quite young, around 22 or 23 years old. He had short, light brown hair and a clean-shaven face, which was flushed, likely from the alcohol. Wearing a flaxen-colored shirt, black trousers, and leather slip-ons, the man stood just over 1.7 meters tall. However, his unusually short limbs made him appear closer to 1.6 meters. Waving his stubby arms and slurring his words, he continued, "How incredible was it? I'll tell you, it's changed my entire perspective on faith. As a believer in the God of steam and machinery, I'm now ready to convert to the eternal blazing sun. Listen up, isn't that astonishing? Can you imagine how famished I was after 5 days? I'd lost my job and been fired by that good-for-nothing manager. I couldn't find work even after exhausting my savings. For 5 days, I starved, barely able to leave my bed. I was on the verge of death. Do you know how that feels? Oh, may God bless you and never let you find out. In that moment, I couldn't bear the thought of dying like this. I came to Trier to make my fortune, and I had to do something. That's when I noticed the portrait of Saint Vive on the wall. Yes, with great effort, I managed to get up, kneel before her, and pray for her help. I was still a believer in the God of steam and machinery then, but what wouldn't a starving man do? Besides, it couldn't hurt, right? 5 minutes after I finished praying, an old friend dropped by and saw my dire state. He didn't have much himself, but he reminded me that I'd rented a kerosene lamp for use at night. The deposit was 35 kopecks, a whole 7 licks. God, I'd completely forgotten. With my friend's help, I returned the lamp and used the refund to buy bread and half a liter of cheap booze. The bread was cold and damp, like it had been doused in putty. The alcohol was a bit off and weak, but it was the most delicious meal I've ever had. Ladies and gentlemen, I was reborn. I found a new job today, and tomorrow, during my break, I'll light a candle at the nearest St. Vive Cathedral. St. Vive was a female angel mentioned in the Eternal Blazing Sun Church's Bible. She was one of the city's guardian angels in Trier. The other 2 were prominent figures from the God of Steam and Machinery Church and the Annals of Intis. Lumière observed the young man's blue eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as he ambled towards the bar. The bartender, who was polishing a glass with a cloth, glanced at the orator on the round table and chuckled. Charlie never could keep quiet. Always talking. In his mid-30s, the bartender sported a thin, dark brown beard circling his mouth, and his hair of the same color was tied back in an artistically casual ponytail. Lumière took a seat at the bar and asked with a grin, "Is he telling the truth?" "Who knows?" The bartender shrugged. "You must have heard the proverb, it's better to trust a snake than a Rhémian." Charlie is from Rheims. Rheims and Riston provinces both hailed from the south. Their accents were similar, but they were mountainous provinces more akin to Lemberg. Lumière mused aloud, "I don't think that's the whole proverb. I feel like there's more to it." The bartender's azure eyes sparkled with amusement as he replied, "You're right. That proverb is longer than you'd think. Trust a Loanese over a Rhémian. Trust a snake over a Rhémian, but never trust the islanders." The islands referred to the Fog Sea archipelago west of Intis. This was one of the Republic's overseas colonies. The islanders often played the roles of thugs and con artists in Trier. Without waiting for Lumière to inquire further, the bartender cast a mocking glance at Charlie, still droning on, and whispered, "If he really experienced that, he certainly doesn't know that the portrait of Saint Vive isn't in his room." "Then whose is it?" Lumière asked, amused. The bartender struggled to suppress his laughter. "Charlie lives in room 504. The previous tenant frequented the Quartier de la Princesse Rouge's Rue de la Muraille. The image in the room was of one of Trier's most famous prostitutes a few years back, Susanna Matisse. Just think. Charlie believes he's praying to an angel for help, but he's actually praying to a prostitute. He even feels lucky to have escaped hunger and landed a new job. How ironic." "Indeed," Lumière concurred. It was a scene beyond his wildest imagination. Reality was sometimes stranger than fiction. He then added, "As long as it works." The bartender didn't pursue the topic further and inquired, "What can I get you?" "A glass of fennel absinthe." Lumière tapped the bar counter with his finger, signaling he was deep in thought. "What kind of food do you have here?" "How about Duvar broth?" 3 licks for a ladle, the bartender suggested. 3 licks equaled 15 kopecks, 0.15 vril d'or. Lumière appeared intrigued. "What's Duvar broth?" The bartender casually explained, "A restaurant owner, Duvar, invented it. He simmered meat, sauerkraut, and turnips together to create a hearty broth. Finally, he added cheese and bread crumbs. Just 1 serving can fill your stomach, and it tastes pretty good." As a result, Duvar is now wealthy and has relocated to Quartier de la Maison d'Opéra. Lumière was currently in Le Marché du Quartier du Gentleman, also known as the Market District, situated on the south bank of the Srenzo River, home to numerous slums. Quartier de la Maison d'Opéra was on the north bank of the Srenzo River, near Avenue du Boulevard, one of the Republic's core areas. Trier's city walls encompassed a total of 20 quartiers. Sounds good. Lumien nodded with a smile. I'll have one. Though he could restore his physical state by 6 a.m. and not worry about hunger, eating was one of the few things that made him feel alive. The bartender nodded and asked, "Little mummy or somersault?" What? Lumien didn't hide his confusion. Unfazed, the bartender calmly explained, "That's common slang in Trier bars, cafes, and beer houses. Little mummy means a small shot of fennel absinthe. Somersault is a double shot. Red tomato has pomegranate juice added, and with mint, it's called parrot. There are plenty more like that. Friend, you still have much to learn in Trier. Little mummy it is." Lumien sensed the bartender's subtle disdain for foreigners, but he didn't mind. 7 licks, the bartender announced as he flipped open a small goblet. This was pricier than the absinthe at Corda's OL tavern, but it was typical in places subject to city taxes. Soon, a glass of pale green absinthe, glowing hypnotically, appeared before Lumien. He picked it up and sipped. The faint, lingering bitterness of the refreshing taste spread and burrowed into his brain. As Lumien waited for the waitress to bring Duvar's broth, he noticed glass jars, hoses, valves, gears, and other items piled beside the bar counter. What's this? He glanced inquisitively at the bartender. As the bartender wiped a glass, he casually replied, "Left by a previous tenant." He's a believer in the god of steam and machinery. He always thinks he has a knack for mechanics and has accumulated many similar items. Where is he now? Lumien asked, playing along even though he knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. The bartender paused for a couple of seconds before answering. He went to the factory, and word is he got distracted while working and was pulled into the machinery. Half of him was crushed. Lumien didn't pry further. He turned to examine the half-assembled parts and fell into deep thought. A few seconds later, he left the bar stool and squatted beside the counter, tinkering with the pile. The bartender glanced at him but didn't interfere. He only notified Lumien when Duvar's broth arrived from the kitchen. After busying himself for a while, Lumien returned to the bar stool and sampled the hearty broth with a spoon. The rich aroma of meat, the taste of cheese, the tangy sauerkraut, and the sweetness of the turnip melded to create an unforgettable flavor. The breadcrumbs soaked in juice were the crowning gem of the dish. Lumien didn't expect that a soup costing 3 licks would include several pieces of meat. It could genuinely fill an adult's stomach. Once the plate was empty, Lumien pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his mouth. He squatted back beside the half-assembled parts and resumed his work. 10 minutes later, he placed a machine on the bar counter. Above the machine was a glass jar, and beneath it were intricate components connected to 2 rubber hoses. Lumien then asked for a glass of clear water and poured in the remaining fennel absinthe, tinting the colorless liquid a pale green. Finally, he inserted one of the rubber hoses into the cup. The fashionable bartender, his hair tied back in a ponytail, watched intently and asked, puzzled, "What's this?" "My invention," Lumien declared, tracing a triangular sacred emblem on his chest. "I'm also a believer in the god of steam and machinery, with a few impressive achievements in the mechanical field." He then extended his black-gloved left hand and gestured toward the machine. "This is a groundbreaking machine. Its effects are beyond your wildest dreams." "What can it do?" Charlie, suspected of having prayed to a prostitute, approached the bar counter with a beer bottle and a curious expression. Lumien explained, both solemn and excited, "It's called the idiot instrument. It tests a person's stupidity and intelligence." "Really?" Charlie and the bartender looked skeptical. Lumien detailed his idea. "It's easy to use. Blow into the tube until the liquid in the cup rises into the glass jar and forms bubbles. By observing these bubbles, we can determine the corresponding stupidity or intelligence index." Intrigued, Charlie said after observing Lumien, "Fascinating. Just as I'd expect from a believer in the god of steam and machinery." He picked up the exposed rubber hose and blew into it. The light green liquid in the cup flowed through the interconnected gears, valves, and other components, rising into the glass jar above and forming a small bubble. "What does it say?" Charlie asked, eager for the result. Lumien's mouth curved into a sly smile. "My friend, the principles of this machine are quite simple. When you believe me enough to actually produce a bubble with it, that's when you prove you're a dumb idiot." Charlie's expression froze, his eyes burning with anger. The bartender beside him laughed. "Excellent prank," he exclaimed, genuinely impressed. Lumien grinned at Charlie, waiting for the explosion. After a few tense seconds, Charlie swallowed his anger and turned to the patrons who had been listening to his story. "Ladies and gentlemen, behold what I've discovered, a groundbreaking machine. It can test your intelligence index." Chapter 113, 113 Tenants. 113 Tenants. "You're such an interesting person." A drunk Charlie slung his arm around Lumien's shoulder as they stumbled out of the raucous bar. Inside, nearly 20 people sang, gambled, and yelled, releasing pent-up emotions. At moments like these, they didn't seem like paupers on meager wages but rather kings and queens. "I thought you'd play Billy B with them." Lumien draped his arm over Charlie's back and grinned as they headed for the stairs leading upstairs. Billy B was a popular gambling game in Trier, one Lumien had just recently learned. Unlike Trierian's favorite fighting evil, Billy B only required a piece of paper. Depending on the number of players, the dealer drew a grid of squares, ranging from 9 to 64. Each square was assigned a number, allowing participants to place their bets. The dealer then determined a lucky number by drawing lots, tossing coins, or throwing dice. The winner took the entire pot. If no one won, the money went to the dealer. The patrons of the Auberge du Coq d'Or's underground bar were either locals or impoverished folks from nearby. Their wallets were thin, so they mainly wagered alcohol instead of cash. For instance, a game of Billy B might only reward the winner with a glass of booze bought by everyone's pooled money. Charlie released a long burp. "I haven't gotten my salary for this week. Can't be too indulgent." He turned to Lumien, excitement in his voice. "Did you know? I'm now an apprentice attendant at Hotel du Cygne Blanc, the one on Rue Neuve in Quartier de Thermes." "What does that mean?" "It means I get to wear a white shirt, red vest, and black suit. I'll tie an elegant bow and earn 65 vol d'or a month. When I become a full attendant, I hear that during peak season, I can make 7 vol d'or a day just in tips. When I strike it rich, I'll open my own motel, no, a hotel. When the time comes, I'll hire you as an attendant foreman." That jerk just walks around in his tailcoat, nitpicking, and earns 150 vol d'or a month. Apprentice attendants earn slightly more than manual laborers. Lumien reeked of alcohol, but his eyes remained clear. He nodded almost imperceptibly. He recalled reading a newspaper in his study earlier in the year, boasting that Trier's laborers earned about 700 vol d'or annually. At the time, Lumien didn't have a clear concept of that figure. He didn't know if it was too much or too little. As a vagrant, he'd only worried about how much food he could get each day and whether kind people might offer him a few licks. The income of Cordoue villagers was mainly in goods, so he understood specific prices and the value of various banknotes, but he lacked a broader understanding. Of course, this was also because Aurora's income was very high, so he hardly fretted about family finances. As far as Lumien knew, Aurora's fame brought her a significant income through book sales and contracts. Last year's royalties had neared 130,000 vol d'or. However, Aurora spent as much as she earned. Spells, materials, and arcane knowledge accounted for most of her expenses. She might also be supporting struggling members of the Curly-Haired Baboons Research Society or donating to government or church-run charities. Yet what puzzled Lumien was the absence of a deposit slip at home when he left Cordoue. He knew all too well that Aurora was a saver. Spending big was only possible because she had stashed away plenty of cash at Suchet Bank and other institutions. For a moment, Lumien suspected that Guillaume Benet's crew had snatched it while he and his sister were being used as sacrifices or vessels. As Lumien and Charlie made their way to the second floor, arms slung around each other's shoulders, a mournful cry pierced the air. "You bastard!" Bang. A door slammed, muffling the wail and leaving only echoes in the hallway. A figure in a crisp black tailcoat approached the stairs from the far end of the hall. He was a young man, roughly Charlie's age. His brownish-yellow hair was styled in a 30 to 70 parting, and his dark brown eyes were devoid of expression. His thin lips were pressed tightly together. Quite handsome, he held a black top hat in his hand, looking more like he belonged at a high society soiree than the Auberge du Coq d'Or. Following the man's cries was a woman's voice, heavy with pain and despair. As Charlie watched the man vanish down the stairs, his flushed face contorted. What a bastard. You know him. Lumien was still rather concerned about his neighbors. After all, he might be staying here for a while. The more he knew about his surroundings, the safer he'd be. Charlie scoffed, that's Laurent, Mrs. Lacazon's son from room 201. Mrs. Lacazon slaves away, mending socks and crafting all sorts for 16 hours a day just to support that bastard. He always dresses nicely and spends her money at fancy cafes, claiming he's mingling with high society to find opportunities to make it big. Hey, he thinks he's so talented. Before Charlie could finish, another heated argument erupted between a man and a woman nearby. They hurled insults at each other. Third floor's a couple who eloped. They're like this every day when they're almost broke. Charlie clicked his tongue and grinned. My friend, you'll have to get used to it. This is the Market District, Rue Anarchy, the Auberge du Coq d'Or. We've got the seriously ill, the bankrupt, swindling peddlers, foreigners who never leave the inn and only drink downstairs, broke street girls, lunatics who wake up in a frenzy, jobless stonemasons, veterans, miserly old men, and wanted criminals. They should all thank Monsieur Ive for being so lenient. As long as they don't default on rent, he's pretty forgiving. Monsieur Ive? The innkeeper? The miser Madame Fels mentioned. Lumien inquired. Charlie grinned and replied, that's him, a kind but stingy fellow. He even provides everyone with free sulfur. Burp, I haven't seen Monsieur Ive in a few days. I'm really worried he'll try to save a few coppets by visiting some random woman on Rue Anarchy and catch some nasty disease instead of patronizing Rue de la Muraille or Quartier de la Princesse Rouge. As he spoke, Charlie waved his hand. Seal, burp. I'm off to bed. I've got to leave at 6 tomorrow morning and get to the hotel by 7. Burp, if you can't find a job, let me know. I'll introduce you to a handyman at our hotel. You can earn 50 vol d'or a month. Stick around long enough, and you might make 75. Plus, there's free food. We even get a liter of wine every night. All right. Lumien smiled as he watched Charlie climb the stairs. At the same time, he muttered to himself, simple provocation isn't doing much for the potion's digestion. He had assembled the idiot instrument in the bar to rile everyone up. The result was successful, but it didn't further the potion's digestion. During his journey from Dariche to Trier, Lumien frequently provoked others. Sometimes he felt the potion digest, but most times, he gained nothing. If he couldn't find a better way to act, he suspected it would take at least a year to fully digest the provoker potion. Heading back to room 207, Lumien heard a bout of coughing from upstairs. He heard a woman berating her lover, calling him lazy and trash. Gunshots rang out, followed by the sound of a group chasing someone outside. This was life at the Auberge du Coq d'Or and on Rue Anarchy. Charlie had said that even the police wouldn't dare walk here alone at night. They needed a partner to bolster their courage. Taking out the brass key, Lumien opened the door and stepped back into his room. The bedbugs seemed to have sensed something and stayed away. Lumien sniffed the sulfur and glanced up. A letter lay silently on the wooden table beside the window. He took a few steps forward and picked up the folded piece of paper. Madame Magician's reply. Lumien mused, unfolding the letter and reading it under the crimson moonlight streaming through the window. I'm glad you arrived in Trier without issue. This shows you've mastered the basic technique of evading capture and regained your experience navigating the dark underbelly of society. At 3:30 p.m. this Sunday, a psychologist will treat you at Booth D in Maison Café, located in Quartier du Jardin Botanique. For the next few days, your mission is to venture near the catacombs in Quartier de l'Observatoire and locate a man named Ostatrol. He often masquerades as a warlock to con tourists and locals alike. By any means necessary, earn Ostatrol's trust and reveal your powers when the time is right. Quartier du Jardin Botanique and Quartier de l'Observatoire were west of Le Marché du Quartier du Gentleman, adjacent to one another. The former lay further south, while the latter was closer to the north, right by the Srenzo River. Lumien read Madame Magician's reply over and over, committing the relevant locations, times, and names to memory. Then he struck a match and burned the Intision scripted paper. Having done all this, he headed to the nearest washroom to freshen up. Afterward, he took out Fallen Mercury, wrapped in black cloth, removed his coat, and lay on the bed. The bedbug-infested ceiling met his gaze, and the faint sounds of coughing, crying, and arguing filled the room. Soon after, the eloped couple announced their reconciliation through a passionate and vigorous exercise, accompanied by uninhibited moans. Outside on the street, a few coarse voices sang vulgar songs, punctuated by gunshots, followed by curses, the clashing of poles, and the sound of sharp weapons piercing flesh. Compared to Cordu, the nights here were far from quiet. Chapter 114, 114 Life Experience. 114 Life Experience. At the break of dawn in early May, the sky remained cloaked in darkness. The setting crimson moon and the scattered stars cast a faint glow, thinning the darkness just enough to reveal nearby silhouettes. Lumière awoke early and freshened up. He donned his formal attire from the previous day and a wide-brimmed top hat. He tried his best to smile at his reflection in the glass window that served as a mirror. As he descended the stairs, hurried footsteps echoed from above. Soon, Charlie came into view. He was still dressed in a linen shirt, black trousers, and strapless leather shoes. His flushed complexion had turned a shade paler, and his small blue eyes betrayed unmistakable fatigue. "Good morning, Seal," Charlie greeted Lumière with enthusiasm. He seemed quite pumped. "Shouldn't you have left long ago?" Lumière asked, smiling. He had only awoken to freshen up when he heard the cathedral clock chime 6 o'clock. Charlie should have departed by then. Charlie lowered his head, adjusting his clothes as he muttered, "I drank too much last night and had a wonderful dream. I didn't want to wake up." As they conversed, the pair reached the ground floor. They traversed the dingy, dimly lit hall towards the door reflecting starlight. An elderly couple, grizzled and slightly stooped, opened the door. In their 60s, they were both short, the man barely 1.65 meters tall and the woman even shorter. Their dark jackets and yellowish cloth dresses were tattered and oil-stained. "Who are they?" Lumière had expected Madame Fels or the miserly motel owner, Monsieur Ives, to be in charge of opening the door in the morning. Charlie didn't slow down, casually explaining, "Monsieur Roure and Madame Michel, they're the swindlers I mentioned yesterday. They scam tourists into buying things. They rise early every day, and Madame Fels has them open the inn's door. In return, she turns a blind eye to the mess and stench they create in their room. Can you believe it? They haven't changed their clothes since I moved in. It's been 7 months. 7 months. No wonder it's so filthy." Lumière could recall his own grimy days as a vagabond, but Aurora's penchant for cleanliness still made him frown. Charlie strode quickly out of Aubert's Ducoque door, puzzledly asking, "Seal, why are you up so early too?" As they stepped onto the street, a bustling scene unfolded before them. Countless workers, clerks, and laborers hurried along in their gray, blue, black, and brown clothes, occasionally stopping to purchase food from street vendors. Some women carrying wooden baskets moved more leisurely. They meandered between various vendors, comparing prices and quality. The peddlers lined both sides of Rue Anarchy, occupying half the street and leaving just enough room for a carriage to pass. They bellowed loudly, vying for customers' attention. "Whiskey sour, apple whiskey sour. 2 licks a liter. Freshwater fish from Bondi's fish pond. Fresh cod and herring, come and take a look. Onion bread, 1 lick, just 1 lick. Salted meat, delicious salted meat. Soap and wigs imported from Lone. Buy the kids a bottle of refreshing soda. Hot sauce, soybean paste, scallions, water celery." Absorbing the sounds and energy of Rue Anarchy, Lumière turned to Charlie and smiled. "I just arrived in Trier and couldn't sleep. I thought I'd walk around and see if I could find a suitable job." As a hunter, it was essential for him to familiarize himself with the area he frequented and understand its intricacies. It would be too late to adapt if something were to happen. Charlie nodded knowingly. He said with enthusiasm, "You could try your luck at Rue de Blouses Blanches. It's between Le Marquet du Gentleman and the steam locomotive station. Many motel, hotel, and restaurant managers like to chat at the cafe there. They use the opportunity to hire dishwashers, floor cleaners, washroom attendants, and apprentice attendants. If you have money on you, remember to buy the cafe waiters a drink. They'll introduce you to the right person and give you a shot at a better job." Without waiting for Lumière's reply, Charlie shared his wisdom. "You must pay attention to your appearance. Do as I do." As he spoke, He raised his hands and slapped his face, mimicking an actual slap, but with less force. Soon, Charlie's pallid complexion regained its rosiness. Look, look. He pointed at himself smugly and said, don't I appear more energetic? Those managers don't want to hire someone who looks particularly destitute and sickly. They think it'll bring trouble. They're either unwilling to give you a decent job or will slash your salary. If you do this before entering the cafe like me, it'll make you seem like someone who has a place to sleep and breakfast to eat. But doing it too early won't work, as this rosiness will gradually fade. This clever job-hunting technique was new to Lumien, a former vagabond. He found it fascinating. He smiled and nodded. I still have enough money to rent a place and fill my stomach. I don't need to do this for now, but who knows if I'll need it in the future. He deliberately didn't conceal the fact that he still had a fair amount of vril d'or. What if a generous soul was willing to donate another sum? Charlie expressed his understanding and took out 5 kopek worth of copper coins to buy onion bread from a nearby vendor. Lumien felt a pang of familiarity. During his time on the streets, if he could acquire money, his first choice was onion bread. It was cheap, and the aroma of onions lingered, creating the illusion of having just eaten a satisfying meal. Lumien also purchased onion bread for breakfast. Alongside Charlie, they navigated through the numerous vendors and exited Rue Anarchy. I love the mornings here. Charlie glanced back and sighed with his signature zeal. Those gangsters who deserve to rot in hell can't get up this early. They can't destroy this captivating vitality. He then waved at Lumien. I've got to take the subway. Otherwise, I'll be late today. That damned foreman will surely dock my pay. After saying goodbye to Charlie, Lumien wandered around Rue Anarchy, exploring the area like a curious tourist. Le Marché du Quartier du Gentleman was situated on the south bank of the Srenzo River, in the southeast corner of Trier, officially known as Quartier 13. Trier boasted various quarters named by numbers, each with its own historical and characteristic monikers. Even officials sometimes used these colloquial names. The district earned its name from Le Marché du Gentleman. Proximity to the Srenzo River allowed for a Suet steam locomotive station, which catered to travelers from southern Intis. Encircled by the market and the steam locomotive station, many of its streets were notoriously dangerous and teeming with impoverished inhabitants. It was one of Trier's slums. To the north of the market district, on the south bank of the Srenzo River, lay Quartier 5, the Quartier de la Cathédrale Commémorative or Quartier Universitaire. Trier Normal College, Trier Higher Mining College, and Intis Academy of Fine Arts were all located here. To the northeast of the city, on the north bank of the Srenzo River, stood Quartier 12, known as the Noël Quartier. It housed the Veterans Home, Wounded Soldiers Hospital, and several large medical facilities. To the northwest of the market district was Quartier 6, Quartier de l'Observatoire, where Lumien planned to visit later. It contained the primary entrance to the catacombs. To the southwest of the market district was Quartier 14, known as Quartier du Jardin Botanique. On Sunday, Lumien was scheduled for treatment with a psychologist at the Mason Café there. This area was also called Quartier du Sans-Culottes due to the large factories located south of the Botanical Garden. And so, Lumien spent nearly the entire morning traversing the streets of Le Marché du Quartier du Gentleman. As noon approached, Lumien returned to the vicinity of Suet's train station, intending to find a spot for lunch before heading to the catacombs in search of the phony warlock, Osta Troll. Walking along, Lumien spotted the couple, Roer and Michel, who also resided at Auberge du Coq d'Or. They were hawking parcels of items wrapped in paper bags to groups that appeared to be foreigners. As Lumien drew near, the gray-haired, ragged, and wrinkled Roer leaned towards him and lowered his voice. Do you want photos of a street maîtresse d'atelier? What's a street maîtresse d'atelier? Lumien didn't conceal his confusion or his revulsion at Roer's stench. Roer waved the thin paper bag in his hand and whispered, in Trier, beautiful girls who model for painters are called maîtresses d'atelier. With the advent of cameras and photographers, they also began taking photo subjects. As you might imagine, some of these photos were sold to painters as reference material, while others. Roer flashed a sly grin and shook the paper bag in his hand again. 4 licks per bag, with 2 photos inside. Others sell them for over 10 licks. Lumien laughed. Monsieur Roer, Madame Michel, is this the souvenir you peddle to tourists? Hearing Lumien address them by name, Roar and Michelle's expressions shifted dramatically. They spun around, trying to escape, but Lumien was quicker and clamped down on Roar's shoulder. Michelle, who had weaved her way through the crowd, noticed her husband couldn't keep pace and returned, her face etched with bitterness. I also live at Auberge du Coq d'Or. My name is Seal, Lumien introduced himself. Finally realizing how Lumien knew them, the couple breathed a sigh of relief and looked at him pleadingly. What's the matter, Monsieur Seal? What kind of photos are you selling? Lumien inquired curiously. Roar responded timidly, scenic photos of the Srenzo River, as well as images of Trier's castles and palaces. No one is causing trouble for you? Lumien asked, grinning. Roar swallowed and said, the people who buy them don't dare to open them on the spot or confront us later. They feel guilty. Besides, no police will bother you if you sell landscape photos. Lumien nodded. Does anyone really sell street maîtresse d'atelier? Yes, Roar confirmed. Last month, the police arrested a group of photographers and art dealers. They said they confiscated over 10,000 photos. If only they could give them to us. Who knows how much we could sell them for? Madame Michelle, also sporting a wrinkled face and hunched figure, mumbled, there was a model staying at our inn previously, but she hasn't been around lately. Perhaps she became the mistress of some painter, or maybe she was captured to be a street maîtresse d'atelier. Auberge du Coq d'Or has quite a variety of guests. Lumien asked with interest, how much can you earn in a week by tricking foreigners into buying photos? We sell them very cheaply. About 10 vol d'or, Roar replied, his gaze slightly evasive. From the looks of it, it's more than 10 vol d'or, but not much more. I'll count it as 12 vol d'or, which is 1,200 kopek or 240 licks. 60 fools fall for it every week. Lumien surveyed the square and expressed his disdain for the average intelligence of the people there. As for Roar and Michelle, they took a significant risk to deceive others, yet, they only earned about 50 vol d'or a month, far less than the apprentice attendants or even laborers. Observing their slightly hunched backs, slender frames, and wrinkled faces, Lumien understood that it wasn't that they didn't want to do more legitimate work for better pay, but rather that they couldn't handle those jobs. With a wave of his hand, he left Suit steam locomotive station and headed northwest towards Quartier de l'Observatoire. Chapter 115, Chapter 115 Legend. Chapter 115 Legend. The catacomb's main entrance was tucked away in Place du Purgatoire, close to the Intuition Observatory. The structure enclosing the entrance was supported by grand pillars, crowned by a dome adorned with intricate stone carvings, reminiscent of a miniature memorial hall or the base of an immense mausoleum. As Lumien approached, he noted a crowd of 20 to 30 people already assembled near the stairs leading down. Their attire varied, but most were dressed formally, both men and women alike. A man in his 30s, sporting a blue vest, yellow pants, and a thick beard, stood before the crowd. His brown curls framed upturned eyes, and he held an unlit iron-black carbide lamp. Addressing the gathered group, he announced loudly, I'm Kendall, one of the catacombs administrators. I'll be guiding you through the ossuary today. Does everyone have a white candle? If not, please let me know immediately. Tourists. Lumien's eyes swept over the stone staircase behind Kendall. It plunged down into impenetrable darkness, its end hidden from view. Beside Kendall stood a massive wooden door, half of it emblazoned with the sun's sacred emblem in gold, while the other half was adorned with an intricate triangle filled with symbols of steam, levers, gears, and more. Upon receiving confirmation, Kendall ignited his carbide lamp and led the group into the depths below. The tourists trailed behind him, some bearing lanterns. Lumien followed, keeping a 4 to 5 meter distance. Clutching the carbide lamp he had obtained from Ramise, he descended the staircase at a steady pace. Thanks to his enhanced hearing, Lumien easily heard Kendall's informative spiel at the front. After 138 steps, you'll find yourselves 26 meters below Trier's streets, surrounded by the remains of nearly 50 generations of Trieranes. That's a conservative estimate. In truth, the history of some of these ossuaries can be traced back to the previous epoch. 47 years ago, there was no more space for the dead in Cimetière des Innocents or Cimetière des Prêtres. White bones lay scattered, and the stench drove nearby residents to protest daily, demanding the relocation of the cemetery. Ultimately, City Hall opted to go underground. They repurposed graves from the fourth epoch and adjacent underground quarries, creating a vast tomb. Today, you'll be visiting but a mere fraction of it. Kendall's voice echoed through the silent, never-ending staircase, imbuing the atmosphere with an eerie sense of foreboding. As Lumion continued downward, a path lined with stone pillars and walls came into view. This passage, unlike other subterranean areas, was well-maintained and frequently repaired. It was smooth, wide, and unnervingly sinister. An icy breeze occasionally swept through the corridor. Gas lamps were strategically placed along the path, casting a dim, yellowish light that allowed shadows to mingle with the illumination, stretching into the darkness. Kendall, clad in his blue vest, warned the visitors once more, "Stay close and don't wander off. There are countless underground areas we know little about. If you get lost, it'll be nearly impossible to find you. Do not stray from the path once inside the tomb. There are passages that lead to deeper, more sinister chambers. The fourth epoch's malevolent spirits lurk within that darkness. Praise the sun and the light. By adhering to the routes endorsed by the Padres, we can avoid all perils." Some visitors outstretched their arms in praise of the sun, while others traced a triangle over their chests. After trailing Kendall and the others for nearly 200 meters, Lumion caught sight of the subterranean tomb. Before him lay a natural boulder cave, modified over time. Its walls were adorned with intricate reliefs of skulls, skeletal arms, sunflowers, and steam symbols. Above the entrance, 2 Intision inscriptions commanded, "Halt. The Death Empire lies ahead." Kendall, the catacomb administrator, turned to address the visitors once more, "Extinguish your lanterns and light the white candles. Everyone must do this. If you'd rather not enter the catacomb, feel free to explore this area, but don't stray too far. It's all too easy to lose your bearings, and that would be a problem. Should you find yourself separated from the group inside the catacomb, don't panic. Locate a road sign. If there isn't one, look above and follow the black line drawn on the tomb's ceiling. It will guide you back to the main entrance." Soon, the lanterns were snuffed out, replaced by the flickering glow of orange candlelight. The visitors hoisted their white candles and trailed Kendall into the catacombs. Lumion observed from a distance, watching as the yellowish flames merged into a stream that meandered into the darkness. He refrained from entering. Grasping his carbide lamp, he circled the tomb's entrance, intent on locating the phony warlock, Asta Troll. A few minutes later, Lumion discovered a small bonfire. Beside a pillar, damp moss clung to the stone wall above. A man was seated on a rock behind the fire, garbed in a hooded black robe. His high-bridged nose and dark brown eyes were framed by a flaxen beard that obscured his chin. He stared intently at the dancing flames. Lumion approached and inquired, "Are you Asta Troll?" The hooded man raised his gaze to meet Lumion's and replied in a deliberately subdued, magnetic voice, "Lost soul, why have you sought me out?" Flames and shadows danced across Asta Troll's face, obscuring his age. He appeared to be somewhere between just below 30 and 40. Lumion spoke earnestly, "I've heard whispers about you. They say you're a mystical warlock who can help me resolve my dilemma." Asta Troll responded in a low, magnetic tone, "Witchcraft is taboo. Witchcraft is a curse. I won't render aid without cause. What must I do?" Lumion pressed, anxiety evident in his voice. Asta replied softly, "The essence of witchcraft lies in equivalent exchange. Reveal the nature of the help you seek first." Equivalent exchange. Have you been reading too many novels? Lumion suppressed the urge to ridicule and antagonize him, instead adopting a pained expression. "I've lost everyone I cared for. I feel forsaken by the world. Sleep eludes me each night. I want to forget these burdens and begin anew." Asta Troll scrutinized Lumion's countenance, finding no trace of deception. He nodded slightly. "I, too, have suffered great losses. It's a curse born of witchcraft. I can empathize with your sentiments and thoughts. Yet forgetting pain is no simple task." "Very well." Lumion exhaled a long sigh and turned to depart. Asta hastily called out, "Wait. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's impossible." "Really?" Lumion whipped his head back, excitement flooding his features. Asta nodded subtly and continued, "Have you ever heard of the Samaritan Women's Spring?" "No." Lumion shook his head. Asta glanced at the burning bonfire and explained simply, in one of the ossuaries within the catacombs, there's a murky spring known as the Samaritan Women's Spring, or the Fountain of Oblivion. Drink from it, and all your pain will be erased from memory. Of course, it's a fabrication. The spring is merely a puddle left by a construction error during the catacombs' creation. The administrators spun it into legend. As Lumien's eyes sparkled with hope, Asta Troll carried on. However, as a warlock, I can reveal that deep within this subterranean realm lies a genuine Samaritan Women's Spring, hidden in a tomb believed to be a relic of the Fourth Epoch. Many corpses there chant, drink the blissful waters of forgetfulness and be purged of primordial pain. I can help you recover it, but the principle of equivalent exchange must be honored. It will cost you 100 vril d'or. 100 vril d'or. Isn't your asking price a bit too low? How can anyone believe that procuring a legendary item as perilous as this could be genuine without demanding a few thousand vril d'or? Lumien had been listening closely, but the absurdly undervalued service left him amused. How could such priceless spring water be worth no more than an apprentice attendant's 2 months' wages? He had read about the legend of the Samaritan Women's Spring in Psychic. Aurora had murmured a word he didn't understand. Its pronunciation likely resembled Granny Meng. Psychic also asserted that the Samaritan Women's Spring was a legend fabricated by the catacomb administrators, but they were convinced the tale had its origins. The Fountain of Oblivion might genuinely exist somewhere on the northern continent. Lumien's eyes widened as he hastened to Asta's side. Clasping his shoulder, he exclaimed, "Really?" Asta brushed his hand away and nodded composedly. "This is a warlock's vow." All right, Lumien responded, thrilled. "But I didn't bring that much money. I'll head back now and return here to find you tomorrow." Asta nodded approvingly. "No problem." Lumien expressed his gratitude profusely, seized the carbide lamp, and departed with excitement. Once out of Asta's view, Lumien's smile vanished. He raised his right palm and sniffed the faint fragrance. Before reaching the Quartier de l'Observatoire, he had deliberately sprayed an inferior cologne on his right hand and touched Asta's body. Back on the surface, Lumien took cover behind a pillar, concealed himself, and waited patiently. The sky gradually darkened. As twilight descended, he detected the faint and familiar scent of cologne. Lumien didn't rush to pursue Asta. After a trailed while, he emerged from his hiding spot and the lingering fragrance, maintaining a distance so great he was nearly invisible. Carriages whizzed past him, and extravagant mechanical contraptions appeared sporadically. Chapter 116, Chapter 116 City of Fashion. Chapter 116 City of Fashion. In the morning, while shopping at Le Marché du Quartier du Gentleman, Lumien noticed that Trier's citizens dressed rather casually, or perhaps boldly. This was evident in the women wearing short sleeves that bared their forearms or garments with cutout shoulders that displayed their collarbones. On the other hand, there was no shortage of peculiar attire. In the Dirige region, a warlock like Asta, donning a black robe and hood, resembled an ancient legend. It was impossible for him to walk the streets openly without being stopped by the police. In Trier, however, passers-by paid him no mind. Such appearances were all too common. People dressed in a variety of antiquated garments. Asta Troll was undoubtedly more cautious. Periodically, he would glance over his shoulder to spot anyone suspicious, but Lumien maintained such a great distance that neither of them were within the other's line of sight. Lumien trailed Asta from one street to the next, following the faint scent of the inferior cologne. As gas lamps illuminated the surroundings, Asta turned into a street sheltered by glass domes and steel frames. This place was brightly lit and lined with upscale shops. Smooth marble paved the ground, and the area bustled with pedestrians, a stark contrast to the ramshackle alleys of Marché du Quartier du Gentleman. "This is the arcade Aurora mentioned." Lumien observed Asta pausing in front of a store to admire the window display. He too slowed down, scanning the area. He quickly spotted people engaging in unusual behavior. Dressed in formal attire, both men and women walked turtles of varying sizes. The turtles inched forward, and their owners, holding a rope, trailed leisurely behind. Upon seeing a man dressed in a black formal suit and silk top hat walking a turtle, Lumien couldn't help but inquire, "My friend, what are you doing?" The man turned his head, revealing a powdered face. He responded with a smile, "Foreigner, I'm simply taking a stroll, walking my turtle." "Why a turtle?" Lumian didn't conceal his puzzlement. The impeccably groomed gentleman appeared pleased to share his fashion philosophy. He grinned and explained, most tree-rains enjoy walking around leisurely, but they fail to grasp the essence of leisure and elegance. They always walk briskly and seem rushed. A true stroll is slower than a turtle. Thus, we walk turtles and let them lead to emphasize our leisurely pace. It's a gauge to measure walking speed and a device to quantify elegance. Lumian had to concede that. Tree-rains consistently expanded his perspective as a country bumpkin from Cordoue. Aurora couldn't have even written a story about walking a turtle. A true tree-rain. Lumian applauded, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Regrettably, the gentleman failed to grasp his underlying message. He smiled modestly and continued to follow the turtle at a leisurely pace. Before long, Asta reached the other end of the arcade. Lumian waited for a moment before cautiously following. After exiting the arcade, Asta positioned himself by the nearby public carriage stop. Within minutes, a massive carriage, drawn by 2 horses, arrived. The carriage was divided into 2 levels. The yellow-painted exterior bore words like Line 7 written in Intision. The driver donned a short green coat and a wide-brimmed hat to fend off the rain. As the carriage came to a stop, a conductor sporting a small hat, striped shirt, and unattractive pants appeared at the open door, scrutinizing each passenger boarding the carriage as if they were criminals. Asta was the 3rd person to climb aboard. He chose a window seat, observing the passers-by and the men and women taking their seats. Lumian watched from a distance without approaching. It was only when the Line 7 carriage had pulled away that he quickened his pace, practically jogging to catch up. Given the relatively slow speed of public transportation and the rule of stopping at every station, Lumian wasn't concerned about being left behind. As he ran, some pedestrians eyed him curiously, while a few even jogged alongside, seemingly believing this to be the latest trend. Is there something wrong with your brains? Lumian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After 3 stops, he saw Asta Troll disembark from the public carriage. This area was already part of Le Marché du Quartier du Gentleman. Asta crossed 2 streets and turned onto Rue de Blouses Blanches, which Charlie had mentioned. He entered an old beige apartment building numbered 20. Lumian halted in front of a street-side newspaper stand, picked up a paper, and casually flipped through it. Simultaneously, he observed the entrance to the apartment building from the corner of his eye. It's 11 kopecks for one, the newsstand owner reminded Lumian when he noticed that he was only reading and not buying. Lumian was holding a copy of Le Petit Tree-Rain, and without minding, he took out 2 5-kopek and 1 1-kopek coins and tossed them onto the other newspapers. The newsstand owner fell silent. Lumian continued reading the newspaper. City Hall discussing new price plans with the water supply company. Valerie slams consumerism as a fetish. Greatest project in human history seeks collaboration. The final advertisement caught Lumian's attention as he reminded him of something. It reeked of a prankster or a swindler's ploy. As Lumian kept an eye on the apartment, he read the corresponding content with growing interest. The future of humanity lies in the stars. The history of mankind was forged by the brave to explore. In this era of rapid technological progress, we lack civilization pioneers, visionaries with exceptional insight and foresight, and adventurers with courage. Last time, we were trapped in the Berserk Sea. This time, we're trapped within the atmosphere. However, human civilization and technology will undoubtedly overcome all obstacles and dangers to forge a true future. We seek to collaborate with all dreamers to construct a space bridge that will enable us to walk from the surface to the Crimson Moon. Point of contact, Buell Patil. Contact method, 9th Rue Saint Martin, 5th floor, Quartier 2. The more Lumian read, the more amused he became. He found himself in deep contemplation. As Cordoux's prankster king and one influenced by Aurora's eccentric ideas, he had never conceived such an outrageous, ludicrous, and absurd notion. Yet, these individuals had brazenly advertised it, as though certain they could fool a crowd. Am I still underestimating the average human IQ? Lumian stroked his chin with his gloved left hand. At that moment, he saw a group of people approaching the old apartment at 20 Rue de Blouses Blanches. The leader was a distinguished-looking gentleman in a silk top hat and black suit. He had a chiseled profile, a mahogany-colored pipe in his mouth, and a diamond ring on his left hand that sparkled under the light. The burly men surrounding the gentleman appeared menacing. They wore either canvas shirts or dark jackets, giving off a gang-like vibe. After they vanished into the apartment's entrance, Lumian walked over with the newspaper. At the base of the stairs, he detected several colognes simultaneously. One was faint and familiar, the inferior cologne he had applied to Asta. The other was more aromatic, sweet, and slightly cloying. Musk cologne. From the men with the pipe. Lumian followed the scent all the way up to the apartment's 5th floor. There, he saw Asta Trull. The impostor dressed as a warlock found himself encircled by the same group of individuals. The gentleman with the diamond ring tapped his forehead with his mahogany-colored pipe, smiling politely. Don't think you can shake us off just because you've moved. Until you repay all the debt, I'll follow you endlessly, like a shadow. Asta stammered fearfully, I'll have money soon. I can return a portion to you tomorrow. Very good, the gentleman nodded with a smile. He then turned the pipe and jabbed Asta's face with the still smoldering end. Asta recoiled in pain but dared not make a sound. The gentleman withdrew his pipe and said gently, yet firmly, this is a little interest. If you don't pay me back tomorrow, I'll take one of your fingers. With that, he placed his hand on his chest and bowed politely. See you tomorrow, my friend. At the staircase, Lumian pursed his lips and muttered to himself, are people and dogs learning from Gehrman now? As Furs Walls, the Adventurer series gained popularity, Gehrman Sparrow impersonators cropped up across the northern and southern continents. Phrases like, this is basic courtesy, and, a bestowment or a curse spread far and wide. As the group approached, Lumian lowered his head and stepped aside, acting like an ordinary tenant encountering gangsters. Chaotic footsteps echoed as they descended floor by floor, soon giving way to silence. Lumian glanced in Asta Trull's direction, noting that he had already retreated to his room and closed the wooden door. After some contemplation, Lumian flexed his gloved left hand and adjusted his hat. He walked out of the staircase and approached Asta's door. Bang. 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 He raised his hand and knocked on the door. After a moment, Asta opened the door, his face a mix of shock and fear. He stammered shakily, I really can't get that money until tomorrow. Before he could finish, Lumian's figure came sharply into focus in his eyes. Lumian spread his arms and asked with a beaming smile, surprised. You. Asta backed away as if he'd seen a ghost. Lumian followed him into the room and smiled at Asta Trull. I truly wish to forget the pain of the past, but I'm also a cautious person. I'm afraid of being swindled and, worse, being mocked as a fool. Chapter 117, Chapter 117 Remuneration. Chapter 117 Remuneration. Asta forced a smile. I'm not lying. There really is a Samaritan women's spring. Is that so? Lumian approached Asta with a grin and said, when the time comes, take a sip first. If it's useful, you'll forget that I haven't paid you. If it's useless, why should I pay you? For a moment, Asta was at a loss for words. He could only smile and nod. Trust me, trust me. Suddenly, he looked past Lumian, his eyes widening in terror. Lumian, instinctively, turned to look at the door, but there was no one there. Seizing the opportunity, Asta ducked and made a break for the open door. Thud. Asta tripped over Lumian's right foot, which had swiftly extended, and crashed to the ground. His nose bridge turned blue, and his gaunt face swelled. Lumian slowly closed the door, pulled up a chair, and sat down. He looked down at Asta, who was feigning death on the floor, and said, Don't tell me you have high spiritual perception and saw a bizarre creature behind me. Did you rush to the door to help me deal with it? Asta was dumbstruck for a moment before rising to his feet and nodding. Repeatedly. That's right, that's right. Lumian smiled and glanced at the rectangular wooden table against the wall. Silver dagger, white candles, a few small bottles filled with different liquids or empty, 2 imitation goatskins, and a paper box emitting the fragrance of plants were strewn across it. He has a certain amount of mysticism knowledge. Lumian shifted his gaze back to the uneasy Asta and asked, Who was that guy with the pipe just now? Baron Brignies. Asta replied hastily. He's the leader of the Savoy mob in the Market District. Savoy was the name of an inland province in the Intis Republic, bordering the provinces of Haute-Hornacis and Bas-Hornacis. It was rich in mineral resources and had a valiant folk culture. A baron. There are still barons? Lumian asked, amused. Ever since Emperor Rosel's death and the establishment of the Republic, aristocratic titles had vanished from daily life. Asta said fearfully, that's a nickname he gave himself. Perhaps his ancestors held such an aristocratic title. Lumian leaned back in his chair and asked casually, why did he come to you? Do you owe them money? Seeing Lumian's harmless demeanor, as though he was chatting with a friend, Asta relaxed a little despite his fear. He said bitterly, in order to buy an item, borrowed 3,000 vol d'or from a loan shark. Later, that man sold the debt to Brignize. I paid back at least 3,000 vol d'or, but he told me there was still 2,000 in interest. If you drag on for another 2 or 3 months, you won't owe 2,000, but 4,000. Lumian watched Asta's expression crumble, the air of mystery gone. He then lowered his voice and said in a beguiling tone, if I were you, I'd find a way to draw Brignize and his crew into a quarry pit. Then, I'd bring down the stone layer above, burying them for eternity. No creditors, no debts. The more Asta listened, the more panic-stricken he became. He stared at Lumian as if he were a demon. He had a suspicion that Lumian had already plotted such a scheme, but with Asta Troll as the intended target, not Brignize. That's murder. A crime. Asta exclaimed in terror. Keep it down. You wouldn't want to lose your voice permanently, would you? Lumian warned him with a smile. So you do realize that's a crime. Did anyone ever tell you that fraud is a crime too? Asta was at a loss for words. Lumian stood up and dusted off his gloves. I'm just kidding. I was testing your character. What? Asta was baffled. Lumian wouldn't reveal that his true motive was to establish an ice-cold, ruthless persona in Asta's mind. It would come in handy during future negotiations. Forced trust was still trust. Congratulations on passing my test. This proves you're not completely without scruples. Lumian grinned and spread his arms. He quickly steered the conversation back on course. What did you borrow so much money for? He glanced around, adding, doesn't seem like there's anything valuable here. Asta instinctively wanted to spout a lie but remembered Lumian's warning. He trembled and said, Do you know about potions? You're really a Beyonder. Lumian chuckled. Seeing that Lumian knew about Beyonders and potions, Asta breathed a sigh of relief. He was glad he hadn't lied. Any fabricated story would be riddled with holes in front of a true Beyonder, easily exposed. If caught, Asta might end up sleeping forever in some underground Trier hideout tonight. Taking 2 deep breaths, Asta continued, a few months ago, I borrowed 3,000 vol d'or from a loan shark to purchase the main ingredient for a potion. Combined with the 4,000 vol d'or I'd saved, I successfully transformed from an ordinary person into a Beyonder. Which sequence do you belong to? You can't even handle a few thugs. Lumian asked with feigned suspicion. Asta looked defeated. I'm a sequence 9 secret suppliant. It doesn't sound weak. Lumian could only gauge by the potion's name. Asta lamented in frustration, I thought secret suppliants were powerful too. The seller even claimed it would allow me to see the world's truth. In the end, aside from heightened spiritual perception, all I got was some impractical sacrificial knowledge and ritual magic. I can occasionally sense the presence of mysterious entities, scaring myself witless, but I can't even defeat a thug. The ritual magic should come in handy, Lumian remarked knowingly. Asta looked close to tears. I'm well versed in mysticism. I'm a follower of the eternal blazing Sunday. How can I pray to an unknown entity? That's too risky. Sigh, there are some honorific names in the potion's knowledge, but they're all concealed entities. Just hearing them is terrifying. I wouldn't dare invoke depravity, true kin, or the gaze of fate. He glanced at Lumian and feigned determination. But I've considered it. If Baron Brignize and his goons corner me again, I'll pray to the hidden existence and gain strength. He was ostensibly talking about Baron Brignize, but his true intent was to caution Lumian against forcing him into a corner. Lumian studied Asta's uneasy face and agreed, that's a wise decision. Baron Brignize and his crew underestimate a Beyonder. If I were in their shoes, I wouldn't give you the chance to reach a dead end. He then smiled at Asta. You'd be dead before that happens. Asta opened his mouth but closed it again, his expression more pain than crying. Lumion walked over to the wooden table and toyed with the empty bottles. You've moved several times, but Baron Brignies keeps finding you. I suspect he or the Savoy mob have Beyonders on their side. Asta gasped in shock. Lumion picked up the silver dagger from the table, twirling it as he said to Asta, I can offer you 100 Vol d'Or as a reward. Huh. Asta was baffled once more. He realized he couldn't keep up with Lumion's thought process. You still want the spring water from the Samaritan women's spring, he ventured. Lumion grinned and replied, tell me, does it really exist? Eyeing Lumion's amused gaze, Asta hesitated for a moment before admitting, I'm not sure. Lumion nodded in satisfaction. What I want is for you to take me to the gathering you mentioned, the one where you bought the potion's main ingredient. The reward is 100 Vol d'Or. Lumion made this request partly because Madame Magician's mission might be connected to the gathering involving Beyonder materials, and partly because he needed a similar event to acquire weapons, materials, sealed artifacts, and arcane knowledge. Asta swallowed hard. I can try, but I'll need the gathering organizer's approval. No problem. Lumion took out a gold coin and beckoned Asta over. This Louis d'Or is your reward for asking. I'll give you the remaining 80 Vol d'Or when I can attend the gathering. Asta hadn't anticipated that his beating would turn into a job offer. He was momentarily dumbstruck. After a few seconds, he cautiously approached the wooden table and took the 20 Vol Louis d'Or. He told Lumion, I'm not sure when I'll get an answer, but no later than next Wednesday. I spend the day near the catacombs and sleep here at night. You can find me anytime. Lumion nodded, smiling as he raised the silver dagger in his hand and plunged it into Asta's shoulder. Blood spurted out, and Asta staggered back in terror. He leaned against the wall and cried out anxiously, Don't kill me. I'm not lying. Lumion picked up a glass bottle from the wooden table and approached Asta with a smile. Don't worry. If I wanted you dead, I would have done it by now. This is called a blood oath. I'm very wary of deception and betrayal. As Lumion spoke, he held the empty glass bottle to Asta's wound, allowing the blood to trickle in. During this process, he smiled at Asta and said, You have a strong grasp of mysticism. You should know what blood means in the hands of others. Don't lie to me. For a moment, Asta couldn't decide whether to rejoice that he hadn't been killed on the spot or despair that his blood now belonged to a man more dangerous than Baron Brignies. Lumion said nothing more. He tightened the bottle cap, tore a strip of cloth from the room, and tossed it to Asta. Bandage your wound yourself. He wasn't familiar with any Beyonder curses, but he could test if expired blood could activate Fallen Mercury's fate-exchanging ability. Even if it didn't work, all he needed to do was convince Asta that he knew how to cast curses. Lumion glanced at Asta, who was desperately trying to staunch the bleeding, and casually asked, What's your plan for dealing with Baron Brignies? With this Louis d'Or and some money I've saved, I should be able to appease them for a week, Asta said with a bitter smile. They won't get a single copper if they push their debtors to death. Chapter 118 Summoning. Chapter 118 Summoning. Lumion nodded, asking, You mentioned that your spiritual perception is quite advanced. Asta briefly fell into a trance before a lingering fear spread across his face. He took a moment to compose himself, then said, That seems to be a trait of the secret suppliant. I can sense hidden creatures lurking in the dark depths, and I can also feel the real world wrapped in a thick veil. Beyond that veil, emotionless eyes watch us. As he finished, Asta panted heavily. Lumion patiently waited for the imposter warlock to catch his breath. Nearly a minute later, Asta exhaled, saying, In the market district in Quartier de l'Observatoire, it's fine, but in underground Trier, I can often sense the end of certain paths. In places I can't see, some creature beckons me to come closer. I wonder what would happen to me if I truly stepped into that darkness. A fine mystical sensor indeed. Lumion silently mocked his hunter's spirit vision while also feeling that a secret suppliant wasn't as useless as Asta claimed. Asta continued, Sometimes, when I see tourists entering the catacombs with white candles, I get these delusions. I think it's a ritual that forms a magical bond with some hidden entity, protecting the tourist from being devoured by the darkness or spirited away by the dead. Lumion was taken aback, inwardly sighing. In terms of mysticism, a secret suppliant is quite potent. It's just that they're not skilled in combat. From Asta's account, Lumian suspected that carrying a lit white candle into the catacombs was indeed a ritual that allowed visitors to evade the hidden perils there. The tomb administrators likely knew this, but in pursuit of profit, they not only kept silent but also encouraged higher-ups to promote the catacombs as a tourist attraction. Lumian remembered his sister Aurora's frequent lament, "Money changes people." I wonder, at a lower level, which one can bring about a person's change more effectively, potions, boons, or money. Lumian muttered silently with a teasing attitude. He then asked Asta, "Have you sensed any danger lurking in the market district's darkness?" Asta's face shifted as he replied in a grave tone, "I dare not approach the burned-out house in Le Marquet du Quartier du Gentleman." At the edge of Le Marquet du Quartier du Gentleman, near Rue de Blouses Blanches, stood a scorched, uninhabited house. The district's members of parliament had long demanded its demolition and conversion into a commercial building, but for some reason, the proposal never reached City Hall's agenda. Even after a decade, the 6-story eyesore still stood. "I didn't feel anything when I passed by this morning." Lumian turned and headed for the door. "I'll visit you again. I hope you won't disappoint me." Asta, his shoulder wound now bandaged, flashed an ingratiating smile. "Rest assured, I'll provide you with an answer." After leaving Asta's room, Lumian suddenly quickened his pace. In a blink, he crouched in the shadows of the stairs leading to the rooftop, silently eyeing the tightly shut wooden door. Nearly half an hour later, having confirmed that nothing was amiss, he slowly descended the stairs with Le Petit Trirane. It was then that he finally heard his stomach growl. Gazing at the makeshift barricade of rocks, logs, mud slabs, and assorted items with a narrow opening as a passage, Lumian spotted a nearby bakery and spent 3 licks to buy half a kilogram of croissants. He also sampled Trier's distinctive fruit juice soda. The effervescent liquid swirled as the currant syrup dispersed like clouds within it. The concoction set him back 13 kopek. If he returned the soda bottle, he could reclaim 3 kopek. Rue Anarchy, Auberge du Coq d'Or. Before Lumian could enter the basement bar, the noise and chaos reached his ears. Just past 9 o'clock, nearly 20 people packed the intimate space. They either sat at the bar or huddled around a few small round tables, their attention riveted on the bartender. The stylish, ponytailed bartender explained the contraption on the bar to an unfamiliar male patron. "This is called the idiot instrument. It tests your intelligence. Care to give it a shot?" The man in the dark jacket seemed intrigued and asked, "How do I try?" The bartender gestured at the exposed rubber tube with a solemn expression. "Blow here until bubbles form in the glass jar above. Your ability to produce bubbles and their size determine the final test results." Without hesitation, the man picked up the rubber hose and blew into it. As light green bubbles emerged from the glass jar atop the machine, everyone in the bar leaped to their feet, applauding wildly and exclaiming, "Welcome, idiot." The man looked bewildered for a moment before grasping the joke. His face flushed crimson. He shot a fierce glare at the bartender and the rowdy patrons before stifling his anger and muttering, "Interesting. This prank is really something. I'll bring a few friends to try it tomorrow." "Is this what friends are for?" Lumian sneered inwardly. He pulled a bar stool over and sat down, telling the bartender, "Give me the usual a glass of fennel absinthe." The bartender grinned. "This one's on me. Your machine's fantastic. Word of its mystical powers has spread, and people have come specifically to check it out. My business has doubled since then. By the way, I'm Pavard Neeson, the owner of this bar and an amateur painter. What should I call you?" "Seal," Lumian replied, his smile unwavering. He noticed the difference between Trirane and the villagers of Cordoue. In Cordoue, anyone who fell victim to such a prank would seek revenge. But Trirane enjoyed finding new victims and watching them get caught, easing their own embarrassment. "You've got a keen brain. You're better at pranks than many Triranes." To the native bartender, Pavard Neeson, this compliment was high praise. He slid a slender glass filled with a light green, hallucinogenic liquid toward Lumian. Taking a sip of the absinthe, Lumian savored the faint bitterness that stirred his senses and made him feel alive. He closed his eyes, soaking in the sensation before asking, "I have a few friends who arrived in Trier before me, but I don't have their contact information. Is there a way to find them?" Pavard Neeson wiped a glass. "If you're wealthy, advertise with the Journal de Trier. If you're not, hire a bounty hunter or information broker to see if they'll take the job. If you're broke, go back to your room and sleep. Maybe one day, you'll bump into your friends on the street. Any recommendations? A reliable bounty hunter or information broker. Lumian wasn't short on cash for now and might receive a donation from a generous benefactor at any moment, but advertising in newspapers was beyond his means. It'd cost at least 3,000 vol d'or. Smaller publications might be cheaper, but they were ineffective. Moreover, he couldn't risk alarming Guillaume Benet and Madame Poualis if they read the papers. Pavard nodded, saying, "Anthony Reed lives in room 5 on the hotel's 3rd floor. You can pay him a visit tomorrow. He's a retired military man turned information broker. Highly trustworthy." Lumian took note of the room number and name. He lifted the absinthe, swirling it gently before raising his glass to honor the bartender. Upon returning to room 207, Lumian didn't waste any time resting. He drew the tattered curtains and performed the summoning dance in the cramped space. His goal was to see what strange creatures he could attract in Auberges du Coq d'Or and Rue Anarchy, preparing for potential future attacks, pursuits, or ambushes. Wasn't according to Asta, aside from the burned-out building, there were no particularly dangerous locations in the market district. Moreover, it was quite a distance from Rue Anarchy, making it unlikely for it to be affected by a Sequence 9 equivalent dancer. After all, the ruins of Corda village, where the power of inevitability was pervasive. Disregarding the more dangerous ones and those that dancers couldn't attract, Lumian believed that even if the strange creatures that appeared later were stronger than him, it would be nearly impossible for them to force themselves on him. The bluish-black symbol representing the great existence and the black thorn pattern from inevitability would be enough to deter them from acting recklessly. In a dance that alternated between madness and distortion, Lumian's spirituality merged with the stirred power of nature, stealthily spreading in all directions. Before long, he sensed watchful eyes upon him. Several translucent, blurry figures floated around the room. Some resembled humans, seemingly residual obsessions lingering after death. Others were grotesque, appearing like bottles or stacked meatballs, possibly originating from the corresponding spirit world. Lumian didn't recognize any of them and couldn't determine their traits or abilities. At that moment, a figure emerged from the tattered curtains. Slightly translucent, it was a woman with long turquoise hair interwoven with green leaves that enveloped its body and concealed vital areas. The rest of its fair, smooth skin was exposed, setting one's heart racing and imagination ablaze. With emerald green eyes, red lips, and an exquisite, alluring face, a single glance at Lumian stirred an inexplicable excitement within him. Chapter 119, Chapter 119 Strange Creature. Chapter 119 Strange Creature. Almost simultaneously, Lumian felt his hair stand on end as a chill ran down his spine. He experienced a strong sense of impending danger. Subconsciously, he pulled out fallen mercury from his waist, ready to rip off the black cloth wrapped around it at a moment's notice. The translucent figure with turquoise hair and leafy coverings floated in midair, scrutinizing Lumian in the room. Its emerald green eyes shifted between a misty and smiling expression, reminiscent of a deep vortex enticing the human soul to sink into it. On one hand, Lumian experienced a familiar yet foreign urge that swept through his mind, disrupting most of his thoughts. On the other hand, he couldn't help but feel fear, akin to a flying insect encountering a spider spinning its web. He slowed down his dance, prepared to stop at any moment. The translucent female figure displayed an eager expression, but it instinctively sensed that something was amiss and hesitated to approach Lumian. Sometimes it leaned forward, sometimes it retreated into the curtains, but ultimately, it did nothing. After Lumian finished his summoning dance, he heard a faint sound in his ears. It was so close it seemed like it was right next door, causing the strange creatures lingering in the room to vanish one by one. The last to leave was the female figure with turquoise hair and leafy coverings. It appeared both reluctant and perplexed. Lumian heaved a sigh of relief and closed his eyes, quietly listening to the indistinct voices within him. He couldn't make out a single word but yearned to hear each one clearly. After a moment, Lumian opened his eyes and gazed at the window obscured by the tattered curtain. He muttered to himself, what was that? His intuition told him that the translucent female figure was far more powerful than the other summoned strange creatures. It wasn't something beyonders at his level could handle. If not for the corruption sealed within his body and the bluish-black pattern on his chest deterring spiritual creatures from subconsciously approaching him even without activation, Lumien suspected something might have happened to him. This piqued his curiosity. How do other dancers survive? He had only dared to perform the summoning dance after confirming the area wasn't too dangerous, yet something nearly happened. How could other dancers avoid such risks? Is it because I obtained my boon through theft and lack some mystical knowledge, or is it because other dancers can only attract strange creatures similar to themselves? Additionally, the summoning dance comes from a hidden existence, so there shouldn't be any problems under normal circumstances. Lumien pondered for a moment. The more he thought about it, the more he felt he was the anomaly. He believed that the corruption in his body was on an extremely high level. Even sealed, it could occasionally attract strange and perilous entities. Thankfully, the corruption also provides protection. Lumien exhaled, stowed away fallen mercury, and lit the iron-black carbide lamp. He sat at the wooden table and flipped through Aurora's notebook. Reading the mysticism notebook from back to front was excruciating. Lacking the corresponding knowledge, he would occasionally feel illiterate. He had no choice but to take out Aurora's earliest notebook and memorize the corresponding symbolism and mystical meaning. However, Lumien couldn't sit down and learn bit by bit from front to back. He believed that if Aurora's witchcraft notebook truly concealed crucial information, it would definitely be in the content from the past year or two when abnormalities gradually appeared in Corda village and the shepherds began their hunt. After nearly 2 hours of struggling with the knowledge known as lightning, Lumien admitted defeat and decided to continue the next night. He washed up briefly and lay on the bed. Recalling the strange creature he had just summoned, Lumien placed fallen mercury beside the pillow, feeling apprehensive. Before leaving Cordu, he had inspected the wicked pewter black dirk and confirmed that the fate it had exchanged from the flaming monster was pain from immolation. The darkness gradually deepened, but Rue Anarchy never experienced a moment of peace. Singing, shouting, cursing, fighting, chasing, coughing, crying, and exercising filled the air, composing a nocturnal symphony. Lumien had grown accustomed to the noise, which even made him feel alive. Unknowingly, he drifted off to sleep. At 6 a.m., the distant cathedral chimed, reminiscent of Cordu. Lumien woke up punctually but was reluctant to open his eyes. After a few minutes, he sat up and fastened fallen mercury to his waist. His dreams had been chaotic throughout the night, but nothing out of the ordinary occurred. Am I overthinking it? Lumien muttered. He opened the door and walked into the nearest washroom. Using the morning light streaming through the window, he examined himself in the mirror. Compared to the same moment the day before, he hadn't changed at all. The color and length of his hair were external factors and wouldn't reset with his physical condition. Lumien bent down and brushed his teeth. As he rinsed his mouth, he caught sight of Charlie entering from the corner of his eye. Don't you live on the 5th floor? Lumien spat out the liquid and turned to ask Charlie. Charlie had changed into a yellowed white shirt with the cuffs rolled up to his elbows. He yawned and said, "Can you believe it? Those guys are already up before 6. The washroom on the 5th floor is packed." He then grinned. "I still like this washroom on the 2nd floor the most. Do you know why? It's clean. Although that bastard Laurent has very high eyebrows and doesn't know how to help his mother at all, he has his strengths. He loves cleanliness. As long as he's in the apartment, he cleans the room every day and takes care of the washroom too. Haha, could it be that he can't use the toilet if it's dirty? So he's the one cleaning." Lumien was surprised. His impression of the young man named Laurent had been that he was cold, haughty, and impeccably dressed. He clearly thought highly of himself and seemed oblivious to his mother's plight. He didn't strike Lumien as someone who'd clean a bathroom. Previously, Lumien had assumed that the other tenants on the 2nd floor had grown fed up with the landlord's penny-pinching ways and had taken it upon themselves to clean their shared spaces. Noticing Charlie's haggard face, as though he'd been up all night, Lumien grinned and asked, "You hit up Rue de la Muraille last night? Did Rue de la Muraille was Trier's infamous red light district? How can I afford to go to Rue de la Muraille? But I'll definitely go there one of these days." Charlie clenched his teeth and continued, "I got back to the hotel at 10 p.m. last night. Then I went to the underground bar and drank with the guys till midnight. In the wee hours, I even had a, shall we say, quite a vivid dream. Seal, our names sound the same, but they're spelled differently. Can you imagine how ecstatic I was in that dream? And when I woke up, how crushed and how, empty. Lumien supplied the adjective. Yes, yes, yes. Charlie walked to the toilet and unfastened his belt. His already narrow eyes crinkled with satisfaction. Lumien pinched his nose and scoffed. You had a wet dream. Charlie shivered, shook his right hand, and laughed. It was the most lifelike dream I've ever had. The woman in it was far more beautiful than any on Rue de la Muraille. She was so tender and passionate. I never wanted to wake up. Well, clearly you couldn't hold out for too long. Waking up was a mercy, Lumien jested. Charlie didn't bother to argue, and instead said earnestly, I'm planning to head to Rue du Rossignol on Sundays after I get paid and when I'm off work. There are a few dance halls there with some affordable pussies. A coworker told me that I only need 52 kopek to treat myself. But right now, I've lost interest. Suddenly, Charlie's excitement surged. Lowering his voice, he confided in Lumien, you know what? A wealthy guest at the hotel has been treating me really well, asking me to deliver food and help tidy up the room. Amen. Lumien inquired with a hint of mischief. Charlie hurriedly shook his head. No, it's a lady. I think she's taken a liking to me. I'm torn. If she makes a proposal, should I compromise my principles? You know these sorts of things are pretty common in Trier. If my ticket to my first big payday, I could soon own my own hotel. I figured you wouldn't hesitate. Though they'd only known each other for 2 days, Lumien was convinced that Charlie's moral compass was quite flexible. Charlie sighed, visibly troubled, and admitted, she's in her 50s. Lumien let out a long, oh, and his expression conveyed his thoughts. Bidding Charlie goodbye, Lumien returned to his room to change into a jacket, pants, and other attire suited for Rue Anarchy. He spent 6 kopek on a scallion pancake and 1 lick on half a liter of apple whiskey sour. Settling into a corner of the street, he leisurely ate his breakfast. Shadows from the buildings on either side cloaked him as he relished the flavors of onions and flour, observing the hawkers, women shopping for groceries, hustling workers, children scavenging for trash, and a barricade in a nearby alley. It was 9 a.m. when Lumien finally rose, dusted himself off, and returned to Aubert's du Coq door. He climbed to the 3rd floor and knocked on room 5's door. The information broker, Anthony Reed, resided here. After a sequence of knocks, a composed male voice with a West Mid-Seashire coast accent, please come in. Lumien turned the handle and pushed the door replied, open. The first thing that hit him was a faintly acrid, minty odor, likely meant to repel insects. Then, he saw a man in his 40s seated by the bed. The man wore a military green shirt, matching pants, and laceless leather boots. His hair was cropped to a fine buzz cut. He didn't possess the tidy, efficient air of a veteran. His light yellow hairline had receded considerably, leaving a vast expanse of forehead. His face had grown plump, his beard meticulously shaven. His skin was slightly oily and his nose pores clogged. He appeared somewhat guileless and unsophisticated. As Anthony Reed turned to face Lumien, his dark brown eyes mirrored Lumien's figure. For some reason, Lumien suddenly felt a twinge of unease. Chapter 120, Chapter 120 Lunatic's Ravings. Chapter 120 Lunatic's Ravings. Anthony Reed regarded Lumien coolly and inquired, what's the problem? I heard from Pavard that you're a reliable information broker. Lumien quickly disclosed his source to avoid wasting time on mutual probing. With his plump face, Anthony Reed nodded knowingly and gestured towards a chair at the center of the room. What information do you need? Or rather, what information would you like me to uncover? Lumien felt a twinge of unease as he faced Anthony Reed, who exuded an air of honesty and dependability. He took a seat and stated succinctly, I'm searching for 2 individuals. Names, appearances, and distinguishing features. Anthony Reed shot a glance at Lumien's left hip. Lumien reflected for a moment before answering, one is Guillaume Benet, formerly a padre of the Eternal Blazing Sun Church. The other is Pualis de Roquefort. Over a month ago, she arrived in Trier with her husband, Beast, their butler Louis Lund, and her lady's maid, Kathy. I don't have any pictures of them. All I can tell you is that Guillaume Benet has short black hair and blue eyes. He possesses a solemn demeanor and strong ambitions. His most notable feature is his aquiline nose. Pualis has long, brown hair and bright brown eyes. Her eyebrows are lighter and thinner, and she exudes an elegant yet alluring aura. Anthony Reed listened intently before rising from his chair. He crossed the room to a wooden table near the window, opened a drawer, and retrieved a stack of white paper and a sharpened pencil. In no time, he sketched 2 portraits. See if these resemble them. Anthony Reed handed the sketches to Lumien. Lumien inspected the drawings and was struck by their vivid, lifelike quality. Aside from the absence of color, they were nearly indistinguishable from photographs. He looked up at Anthony Reed in astonishment, remarking, "Uncanny. How can you reproduce their likeness so accurately based on my brief description?" He had assumed Anthony Reed would draft several sketches for him to review before finalizing the portraits. Anthony Reed cracked a rare smile. "I recreated the images from the official wanted posters. The authorities are searching for them as well." No wonder. Suddenly, it all made sense to Lumien. Both Padre Guillaume Benet and Madame Pualis were devotees of evil gods who had been granted boons. Once Ryan and his companions reported the situation, it was bound to attract the necessary attention. With this realization, Lumien's disquiet grew. "I must be wanted too. Did Anthony Reed see my portrait? Does he recognize me?" Trying to maintain his composure, Lumien queried the information broker, "I'm not surprised. I want to know the value of their bounties." Guillaume Benet has a bounty of 20,000 vol d'or. Each piece of information is worth 500 vol d'or. The same goes for Pualis, Anthony Reed replied nonchalantly. Lumien smirked. "If you uncover any useful information, you can cash in on the bounty twice." He was implying that Anthony could claim one share from the authorities and another from him. Anthony nodded in agreement. "I'll take your assignment. 500 vol d'or, with 100 up front. These are my terms. If you can't accept them, find another information broker or bounty hunter." Lumien knew there was no room for negotiation. He could only nod slightly and concede, "No problem." Just as he was about to hand over the money, a gunshot suddenly erupted from outside the window. Anthony Reed's entire body shuddered as if confronted with his mortal nemesis. He instinctively ducked beneath the wooden table for cover. Lumien was taken aback. Wasn't this reaction a bit extreme? Wasn't this typical of life in Rue Anarchy? Gunshots, brawls, and large-scale skirmishes were commonplace here. Those who lived in this area should have adapted by now, only needing to steer clear of the windows to avoid stray bullets. Before long, the commotion died down. Anthony Reed took a few seconds to regain his composure before emerging from under the table. He offered Lumien a sheepish grin and explained, "I apologize. A few years back during the war, I suffered from post-traumatic stress on the battlefield and had no choice but to retire and return to Trier. Then why choose to live in Rue Anarchy, where gunfire was a regular occurrence?" Lumien didn't press further. He had no interest in Anthony Reed's psychological issues. He withdrew a 50 vol d'or note and gently traced his finger over the image of Levanx, the bustling commercial streets, and the silhouettes of passing merchants. Feeling the remaining texture, Lumien handed the grayish-blue banknote, 2 Louis d'or, and 2 5-roll coins engraved with the sunbird to Anthony Reed. His wallet felt a third lighter, and he couldn't shake the sense of money slipping through his fingers. As he examined the Le Marquet du Quartier du Gentleman behind the banknotes, Anthony Reed bent his finger and flicked the surface to verify its authenticity under the sunlight. Satisfied, he pocketed the money and inquired, "Do you want to check in with me periodically for updates, or should I have an address? If I come across any information, I can drop it off at your place. I'm in room 207. Lumien knew he couldn't conceal his stay at the Auberge du Coq d'Or from Anthony Reed, so he provided his room number. Upon leaving room 305, Lumien's expression grew increasingly solemn as he muttered to himself, "I need to be extra cautious in the coming days to prevent Anthony Reed from betraying me. Perhaps I should find an opportunity to demonstrate my strength in front of him, convincing him that I won't let any transgressions go unpunished." As Lumien mulled over his thoughts, he made his way towards the stairs. Suddenly, he heard someone exclaiming, laughing, and sobbing, "I'm dying, I'm dying." Lumien glanced in the direction of the voice and spotted a man squatting by the door of room 310. The man wore a filthy linen shirt and yellow pants. His unkempt black hair cascaded down to his shoulders. At that moment, he clutched his head with both hands and stared at the ground, repeatedly muttering, "I'm dying, I'm dying." His voice oscillated between fear and insanity. The occasionally lucid madman that Charlie mentioned. Lumian sized him up for a few seconds, leaned in, and asked curiously, "Why do you think you're about to die? Do you have a terminal illness?" Without raising his head, the men continued to yell, "I'm dying, I'm dying." Lumian smirked and strode past him into room 310, its wooden door flung wide open. The room's layout mirrored his own in 207. It was relatively tidy, save for the inevitable bugs that couldn't be evicted. Lumien's gaze swept over the kerosene lamp, a multitude of books, fountain pens, suitcases, and other belongings. The madman stood up and declared in a daze, "This is my territory." "I know," Lumien replied with a grin. "But if you're about to die and you don't have any children or relatives, why not use your inheritance to help poor neighbors like us?" He observed that the madman was only in his late 20s. His bushy, black beard had been left unshaven for who knows how long, causing his blue eyes to appear as if they were buried deep within a forest. The madman stared blankly for a few moments before clutching his hair and screaming in anguish, "They're all dead. They're all dead. I saw the Montsouris ghost. They're all dead. I'm about to die too." The Montsouris ghost. Lumian finally heard something distinct from the madman. He had deliberately provoked the other men to see if he could elicit a different reaction. The positive feedback made him feel as if he were making progress with digesting the potion. One of the acting principles of a provoker is that provocation is only a means and not an end. Lumian studied the madman thoughtfully and inquired, "Why would the Montsouris ghost cause them to die and push you to death's door?" The madman lowered his head and mumbled, "Anyone who sees the Montsouris ghost will die. Their family will die too. They'll die within a year." Is this the madman's delusion, or did something like this actually happen? If so, was it a curse? Lumian prodded, "Where did you encounter the Montsouris ghost?" "Underground, underground. It's beneath the market district." The madman crouched down again, his back pressed against the wall as he hugged his trembling body. The underworld beneath the market district. Couldn't he just report it to the two churches and have them send people to eradicate the unclean beings? Lumian mused silently. Seeing that the madman had reverted to his I'm dying, state, he abandoned his pursuit of the matter, exited room 310, and descended the stairs. Tomorrow was Sunday. Lumian planned to visit the Mason Café in Quartier du Jardin Botanique at noon to familiarize himself with the area. In the afternoon, he'd head to the underground cemetery to see if Asta had received a reply from the gathering's organizer. The alleys around Rue Anarchy were cluttered with obstacles made of rocks, wood, branches, and assorted debris. Even on the main road, one could stumble upon them from time to time. However, there was already a path wide enough for two carriages to pass through. These were called street barricades, and they could be found in many districts. Some bore the marks of smoke and fire, while others still had remnants of dried blood. They were a unique feature of Trier, contrasting starkly with the pedestrian streets of the arcade. Lumian stepped over a low point at the edge of emerged from the dim alley, and a barricade, entered the street. He then made his way towards the public carriage sign, intending to take such transportation to Quartier du Jardin Botanique. As he walked, Lumian spotted numerous vagrants lying in corners, basking in the sun and picking at lice. All were filthy, gaunt, and devoid of energy. This brought back memories of his own days as a vagrant. Unlike the Lone Kingdom, which prohibited vagrants from sleeping on streets and in parks, the Intis Republic had Northwest such rules in place. However, they were forbidden from entering fee-paying establishments or private venues. They often mocked Lone for its lack of culture. Lost in thought, Lumien's eyes narrowed. He sensed someone was tailing him.